Chapter 1181. What's the matter? Why are you so panicky? How can you be so calm? Looking at the cowardly side of his subordinate, Shiheng reprimanded him. He had already decided to punish this messenger after the big battle. Without paying attention to Shiheng's displeasure, the messenger knelt on the ground and said with a trembling body, "Marquis, the Walla army has retreated. They didn't have the intention to greet us and rushed out of the barracks." Hearing the news that the Walla army had retreated, Shiheng's eyes narrowed for no reason and he had a bad premonition. During this period of time, everyone had been on guard against each other and they were no longer as sincere as they were at the beginning. However, even though he was mentally prepared, Shiheng was still very angry when he heard that they had retreated without fighting. "Got it. You just said that there's more. What else?" "There's more. Deputy Chief Tsingguang has escaped with 50,000 infantrymen under him." As if he had exhausted all his strength, the messenger mustered up the courage to finish speaking. "What?" Hearing this news, Shiheng's expression changed drastically. He turned around abruptly and the sword on his body was placed on the messenger's neck. With the cold sword on his neck, the messenger's face suddenly turned pale. However, since Shiheng had asked this question, he had to answer it. He could only continue to speak. "Just now, Deputy Chief Tsingguang has retreated with his troops. They withdrew all the troops that were attacking the city and fled to the south." "Ayaya Tsingguang, you've ruined Marquis' plan." Hearing that Tsingguang had also escaped, Shiheng's expression changed drastically. Although Tsingguang only had 50,000 soldiers in his hands, he was responsible for attacking the first city. Once they retreated, the 5-star army in the first city would no longer be in danger. At the same time, they might be behind him. If that was the case, how could he resist? Not to mention, after days of bitter battles, the 50,000 soldiers under Tsingguang had experienced life and death situations. They could be described as elites. Once they left, not only would their combat power be greatly reduced, they would also not be able to find a replacement. Tsingguang's escape added even more uncertainty to the battle. In a fit of anger, he swung his saber and the messenger's head flew into the air. Shiheng, who had killed someone, had red eyes and even his arms were trembling. It was obvious that he was angry in his heart. "Report. Marquis, the 4 gates of the first city have been opened. They've rushed out of the inner city and are heading toward our camp in the outer city." Another messenger rushed over on horseback. Before he arrived, his shout had already resounded in the air. If Tsingguang was still around, they would have been able to more or less delay the 5-star army in the city from leaving the city since they had already taken down the outer city. But now it was too late. Shiheng's body shook slightly on the horse. Before the battle had even begun, the result had already been decided. Now that he was facing internal and external troubles, he knew that he had already lost. Shiheng forced himself to stay alert. He looked at Rong Xiao, who was not far away, and said to the bodyguard beside him, "Ask General Rong to come over. Also, you go and inform General Fong to retreat immediately." Rong Xiao was still riding on his horse, feeling the tense atmosphere before the battle. For him, who was on the battlefield for the first time, this feeling was very exciting. It caused his adrenaline to rise uncontrollably. His face also turned a lot redder because of this. "General Rong, Marquis wants to see you." The bodyguard walked over and conveyed Shiheng's military order. Okay, thank you for your trouble." Rong Xiao was very excited when he heard that Shiheng wanted to see him. He, who had focused all his attention on the battlefield, did not know what had happened behind the scenes. If he knew, he would not be happy but scared to death. He came in front of Shiheng with an excited face. He tried his best to appear calm in order to leave the best side of Shiheng. "Not bad. It's General Rong's first time on the battlefield, yet you're so calm. You truly have the demeanor of a great general." Shiheng, who was trying his best to raise his spirits, praised Rong Xiao. This time, whether they could successfully escape or not depended on this person. "Thank you, Marquis, for your praise. This is all because of your leadership." Rong Xiao did not dare to take the credit. "Very good. You are not anxious or impatient. Not bad. Since that is the case, I will leave the first battle to you. Can you complete it?" There was no time and Shiheng did not want to prepare any more groundwork. He went straight to the point. Hearing that he could be the vanguard, Rong Xiao was very excited. He patted his chest and said, "Marquis, please rest assured. Our swords and arrows want to drink blood. We want to have a taste." "Okay, I approve. You can go. As long as you make a great contribution, Marquis will definitely report it to the Emperor and ask for your reward." Seeing Rong Xiao so set off, Shiheng's face finally showed a trace of satisfaction. "Thank you, Marquis. Rong Xiao cupped his fists and said gratefully. He then turned around and rode away. He did not know that once he left he would never return. Let's retreat. After looking at Rong Xiao's back, Shi Heng turned around and left. War was like this. It was either you die or I live. In order to survive, he could only sacrifice Rong Xiao and his 100,000 troops. On the other side, Shi Heng's order also reached the ears of Liaodong Iron Cavalry General Fang Dingshan. You want us to retreat? What the hell? Fang Dingshan, who had long been prepared to compete with the 5-star troop, was obviously unhappy. He looked at the messenger with a glint in his eyes and a murderous aura exuded from his body. General, this is Marquis order. The messenger thought for a moment and was afraid that Fang Dingshan would vent his anger on him. Marquis had already killed one and he did not want to be the second. Thinking of this, he carefully moved forward and said, General, the Wala cavalry has already retreated. General Tsingguang also left with his troops. When Marquis told me to inform you, he was also prepared to retreat. What do you think? Fang Dingshan, who was about to vent his anger on the messenger soldier, involuntarily paused. After about 3 breaths, he let out a long sigh. I see. Thank you for the information. General, you are too serious. Please hurry up. When the messenger heard Fang Dingshan's words of gratitude, he immediately let out a long sigh of relief. He then cupped his fists and left. After the messenger left, Fang Dingshan did not dare to delay any longer. He said to Luo Baiquan, pass down the order. All troops retreat. Retreat. Military orders were like mountains. Although Luo Baiquan still had a lot of questions since it was the general's order, he had to carry it out. After he agreed, he ordered the 70,000 Liaodong cavalry to retreat in echelons. Elites were indeed elites. Even when they were retreating they were still orderly. Compared to the army led by Shi Heng and Tsingguang who were fleeing in panic, they were much better. The 5-star army had arrived. According to yesterday's agreement, they launched a general attack at 3 in the morning. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers outside the city and tens of thousands of soldiers inside the city launched an attack together. If Shi Heng could have predicted this, or if he could have remained calm in the face of danger, with his advantage in numbers and the cooperation with the Wara cavalry, he might not have lost the battle. On the contrary, as long as he persevered, victory was not impossible. After all, the provisions of the new army in the beginning city had been used up. Just this morning Yang Si took out all the food he had stored and made a delicious meal for the soldiers. It was as if he was going to break the axe and sink the boat. If such an opponent could be suppressed, it would only take a long time for the morale to drop, and it would be time for a counterattack. Unfortunately, under a series of small actions and preparations, Baiming and Wala could not be of one mind, let alone fight the enemy together. When he learned that the 5-star army suddenly appeared in the east and north and began to attack, leader Yeshen decisively gave the order to retreat. He could not guarantee that when the 5-star army arrived the Baiming army could not be relied on. He would never put his hopes on the so-called allies, especially those who were not reliable. Yeshen's retreat was just a signal to retreat. Next was Tsingguang's 50,000 soldiers, Fang Dingshan's 70,000 Liaodong cavalry, and Shi Heng's 30,000 elite soldiers. An entire army of 200,000 retreated without a fight, leaving Rong Xiao and the 100,000 infantrymen on the battlefield. From an advantage to a disadvantage, the originally fierce battle ended up like this. It seemed to be a coincidence, but if one thought about it carefully, it was inevitable. If the alliance was not united, it would be better not to unite. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Having said that, Rong Xiao, who was completely unaware of all this, was riding on his warhorse in high spirits and watching his army get into formation to fight the enemy. As expected of a merchant, he knew how to maximize the benefits of everything. After receiving Shi Heng's order, he gathered the generals under his command and told them openly, "Let's go and see what's going on. I am a person who does not know much about war, nor do I know much about military matters. However, there is one thing that I know, and that is that it is natural for soldiers to eat grain. Therefore what I want to do is to solve your worries. How about this? In this battle, no matter how the court rewards the generals who have made great contributions, I will reward them with 1,000 to 10,000 taels of silver. How about it? When there is a great reward there will be brave men." Under the great reward the generals were all excited. They all expressed that they would fight this battle well and add glory to Rong Xiao's face. Laughing with satisfaction, Rong Xiao watched the generals leave the tent. Humming an unknown tune, he called for the military singers and prostitutes, and just like that they began to drink in the big tent. To Rong Xiao, as long as everything was arranged to the right people, He only needed to wait for the good news in the big tent. While drinking wine and watching the music and dance, he even imagined the scene of going to Shurheng to report his victory. Presumably this time he would definitely achieve great success. First city. All the cavalry warriors of the new army had done all the preparation work before 3 o'clock in the morning. They filled their stomachs, fed their war horses, sharpened their swords and spears, and prepared their bows and arrows. As soon as the time was up, they would set off together and rush out of the city. They wanted to vent all the grievances that they had suffered during these days at this moment. Chapter 1182. As the commander of the army, Tiger's man wore an eye-catching purple cloak. It was the unique symbol of a first-rank officer. At this moment he was also riding on a horse with a scimitar in his hand. He had given the order for the entire army to charge. According to the plan, the 5-star army outside the city would attack half an hour before the hour of the 5-star army. After all, the distance between the two sides was quite far and it would take some time for them to rush over. The 5-star army inside the city would only need to wait for the hour of the 5-star army to pass before launching their attack. Just as the hour of the 5-star army passed by and Tiger's man was prepared to charge into the city, the scouts suddenly sent a message saying that the Baiming army on the outer city gate was beginning to retreat. What's going on? How is this possible? Tiger's man said with a face of disbelief. The war hadn't officially begun yet. How could the Baiming army retreat? Suspecting that this was a trap, Tiger's man personally led a group of generals to the inner city gate tower. As expected, they saw the Baiming soldiers fleeing in panic. Through the binoculars, they could clearly see the Baiming army soldiers on the outer city gate tower quickly rushing down the city. Some people even threw the Baiming dragon flag in their hands to the ground in order to save time. There were also some soldiers who were pushing each other and cursing as they went down the city gate. Some of the more violent ones even attacked, but there were no deaths. This can't be fake, right? Deng Yu, the commander of the new 1st Army's 2nd Cavalry Division, who saw all of this through the binoculars, couldn't believe it. After all, chaos before the war had even begun. This didn't make sense, so it was normal to think more about it. Fake? If this is all an act by the Baiming army for us to see, then I can only say that they shot themselves in the foot. What's so scary about an army without any morale? How could they be a match for our new 1st Army? Tiger's man put down the binoculars and said with a proud expression. In a battle between two armies, the level of morale often determined the outcome of the battle. Unless it was a very elite army, otherwise, it was absolutely impossible to stage such a scene because it was very likely that the morale of the army would really be lax and out of control. That's right. It's very likely to be true. Although we don't know what's going on outside, we shouldn't miss such an opportunity. Commander, I suggest we launch the attack in advance, Lu Zhua, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, requested after putting down his binoculars. That's right, our heavy cavalry regiment requests for battle. Regiment Commander Windchaser said. Our light cavalry regiment is fast, we also request to fight. Commander Ma Xiangshan did not forget the last time they encountered the Liaodong Iron Cavalry that retreated without a fight. Although there was a military order for him to retreat at that time, and although it seemed that the order was correct, it was still a humiliation to him and the light cavalry regiment. Even in his dreams he wanted to take revenge. Our reconnaissance regiment also requests to fight. Regiment Commander Ding Shan also stood up. Okay, seeing that it was about to become a mobilization meeting, Tiger's mane quickly waved his hand. Since everyone is so full of fighting spirit, then I don't think there's any need to prioritize. Let's go out in 4 cities. In short, we have to go all out and defeat the enemy. Yes. There was no need to fight. Everyone could go out of the city with the fastest speed to join the battle. The Tiger generals were all eager to try, and their faces were full of murderous intent. Next, the generals rushed down the city. Then, the 4 main city gates of the first city, which led to the outside world, were all opened. Then, the vast cavalry army rushed out and rushed to the barracks behind Rong Xiao's army, which was not prepared. After receiving Rong Xiao's promise of a heavy reward, the generals were full of fighting spirit. Because of this, they all wanted to make the first contribution. The generals who were supposed to be in charge of the security at the rear also moved their troops to the front. In this way they could find an opportunity for themselves. It was precisely this kind of move that made their rear seem very empty. When the new cavalry army rushed out of the inner city, smoothly passed through the outer city, and arrived at the rear of the Baiming army, they did not encounter any decent resistance at all. Although the division commanders and regimental commanders were also very curious as to why such a result occurred, they did not stop attacking. Instead, when they arrived at the rear of Rong Xiao's army and saw that the enemy's rear was undefended, one by one, they pounced forward like wolves and tigers. They did not care why such a fatal loophole appeared in the Baiming army. They only knew that if they did not take advantage of the situation, they would be bastards. Since the enemy was not prepared, they only needed to charge forward. They would definitely not greet the enemy first and give the enemy time to prepare for battle. As a result, the Baiming army was in a tragic situation. Suddenly, tens of thousands of cavalrymen from the five-star army appeared behind them. It was as if the heavens had descended from the sky. Several Baiming army that had reached tens of thousands of soldiers were almost defeated after being stabbed in the butt. This kind of defeat quickly affected the other Baiming army nearby. Some generals even did not know what to do with their troops. Should they prepare their bows and arrows to kill the five-star army? Or should they turn around and deal with the five-star army that had suddenly appeared behind them? Even the generals could not make a decision at the first moment. The soldiers below were even more chaotic. Many soldiers had fled before the battle. There were also many people who were smart enough to kneel on the spot and raise their weapons high. They were already prepared to surrender. 100,000 soldiers. Although it seemed like a lot, if they really fought, it would be difficult to kill them all even after a day and a night. However, when the thoughts of surrendering and fleeing took over, it was not that difficult to deal with. In less than an hour, the army began to collapse. When the five-star army arrived in front of them, it did not take much effort for them to easily obtain victory. The 1st Cavalry Division was the most outstanding cavalry. Under the leadership of Division Commander Tian Hu, they were the first batch of five-star army cavalrymen to charge into the Baiming army. The original 10,000 soldiers had now expanded to 20,000 under Yang Qindong's special permission. This was also their first battle after the expansion. Division Commander Tian Hu's request for everyone was to perform well, especially the veterans. They had to set an example for the new recruits and let them know what it meant to be invincible and invincible. When the 20,000 cavalrymen rushed over excitedly, they saw that the Baiming army was basically defenseless. The scene of kneeling and surrendering was so spectacular and so ironic. Even Division Commander Tian Hu, who had experienced countless bitter battles, did not know how to describe what he was seeing at this moment. Division Commander, what is going on? 1st Cavalry Division Commander Taimur rode to Tian Hu's side and scratched his head with a confused expression. Not only Commander Taimur, but even Tian Hu himself did not know what was going on. However, he was still a division commander and had been placed in an important position by Yang Qindong. His ability to adapt was still very strong. After a short moment of hesitation, he said, "Let's not care about that. We will continue the pursuit as planned. As for these captives, let the people behind us deal with them." The 1st Cavalry Division was the strongest cavalry division. What they should be doing was searching for the strongest opponent that matched their status, not standing here and receiving captives. After Tian Hu gave the order, the 20,000 cavalrymen leaped over the captives and continued to charge forward as if they did not see them. Even when they passed by Rong Xiao's camp, they did not have any intention of stopping. Following closely behind were the New Army and the Liaodong Cavalry Division. They only stopped for a moment before making the same decision as the 1st Cavalry Division. They let go of the Baiming captives and continued to chase forward. Before they came, Yang Qindong had personally given the order that their opponents this time were the Wala Cavalry and the 70,000 Liaodong Cavalry of Baiming. As long as they dealt a heavy blow to them, the five-star army would have no opponents on the grasslands in the future. This would be a great achievement. As for the Baiming captives who did not even have the will to fight, who would care about them? 3 armies passed by one after another without the slightest pause. This frightened Rong Xiao, who was in the tent. A moment ago he was still drinking wine and watching music. However, in the next moment, someone came to report that the army was in chaos. The five-star army cavalry appeared from all directions, and several generals had already knelt down and begged the five-star army to surrender. The wine that he had just drunk was spat out from his mouth. Rong Xiao sat there in a daze as if he had been struck by lightning. It was not strange for him to have such an expression. If it was someone else, they would not be any better. It was just 100,000 Ming Dynasty soldiers. Even if infantry were weaker than cavalry, they should not have been defeated in less than an hour. Moreover, didn't they also have cavalry? Whether it was the Wala cavalry or the 70,000 elite Liaodong cavalry, what did they do? Did they also lose? There were too many things that he could not understand. At this moment, Rong Xiao did not know that Shi Heng and the cavalry had already escaped. He was still sitting there like a fool. until the sound of tremors came from the tent, and someone came to report that the 5-star army cavalry was charging towards the tent. Rong Xiao was even more cowardly as he buried his head under the table. He did not even dare to raise his head. He did not have the demeanor of a commander of 100,000 soldiers. At this moment, Rong Xiao could only pray in his heart that no one would notice him. No one would discover him. Perhaps his prayers really worked. Surprisingly, those cavalry troops didn't enter his tent and just ran past him several hundred meters away. The outside quickly returned to silence and no one came into the tent. Rong Xiao patted his chest and got up from the table. Then he saw that everyone in the tent was like him, trembling on the ground. If it was only the dancers who were behaving like this, it could still be forgiven. After all, they were women, not soldiers, so he couldn't be too strict with them. However, the bodyguards who were protecting him were also behaving like this, which really made Rong Xiao furious. He couldn't help but shout loudly, "You! What are you all doing?" Chapter 1183. This shout scared the bodyguards who were kneeling on the ground. None of them dared to raise their heads. Rumble. Rong Xiao, who was about to stand up and teach those bodyguards a lesson, once again hid under the table. His body trembled once again. Rong Xiao was about to stand up and teach those bodyguards a lesson. However, the same thing happened again. The cavalry passed by the camp again and did not disturb them. When everything quieted down, Rong Xiao lifted his head from the desk and saw that the bodyguards were still in the same position. He was furious. Just as he was about to scold them, the cavalryman came again, forcing him to bury his head in his chest again. This repeated 3 times. It was the 1st Cavalry Division, the new army, and the Liaodong Cavalry Reinforced Regiment that passed by. This scared Rong Xiao 3 times, but it also made him more courageous. Holding a sharp long sword in his hand, he stood up. He wanted to kill 1 or 2 of the bodyguards. He wanted to remind the others that he was the master. When there was danger, they should protect him and not just care about their own lives. Another rumbling sound rang out, but to Rong Xiao, who had already experienced it 3 times, it no longer had any effect of intimidating him. However, just when he thought that the cavalry would pass by safely, the footsteps outside the tent were getting closer and closer. Then the curtain of the tent was opened from the outside. The commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Lu Zhua, walked in with a group of soldiers. They had also seen some tents here and had come to search them out of curiosity. As a new army that had guarded the city for several months and been trapped for more than a year, their combat strength had dropped a level due to the lack of nutrition. Yang Qindong took this into consideration and ordered them to stay and clean up the battlefield. It was the easiest job. The 1st Cavalry Division of the new army was in charge of capturing prisoners in this area. Originally, he thought that there would be no one in the tent since several cavalry units had passed by. However, he didn't expect to see more than 30 people when he entered the tent. One of them was even holding a sword and standing in the middle of the tent with an angry look on his face. There is a tough guy here. Lu Zhua sighed when he saw the person. As his voice fell, several bodyguards behind him rushed out and surrounded the person holding the sword. It seemed that if the other party dared to make a move, they would rush up and chop him into meat paste. The person holding the sword was Rong Xiao. He wanted to teach those bodyguards a lesson and then force them to protect him and leave here. He did not expect that there would be cavalry who noticed this place and rushed in. When he saw those bodyguards surrounding him, he was scared and threw his sword on the ground. Then he knelt on the ground and shouted, "Sir, please spare me." He turned out to be a coward. This dramatic scene stunned Lu Zhua. "Yes, I am a coward." In order to survive, Rong Xiao, who was kneeling on the ground, forced himself to raise his head. He wanted to see who the other party was and whether they could be bribed. As long as they could let him live, he was willing to pay a lot of money. When he raised his head, he recognized Lu Zhua. He immediately shouted, "Division Commander Lu, I am Rong Xiao. You don't know me? I used to do business with the city lord's mansion in the 1st city." If he did not shout like this, Lu Zhua might not recognize him. If he was captured as an ordinary prisoner, he might have a chance to escape. But now, his shout had completely exposed his identity. After Lu Zhua heard the name Rong Xiao, he frowned and asked, "Are you the Beiming merchant Rong Xiao?" Hearing Lu Zhua call out his name and identity, Rong Xiao quickly raised his head and said, "Yes, Division Commander Lu, I am Rong Xiao. We have met before. I have even worked in the army." This time, Lu Zhua looked carefully and recognized that the person in front of him was indeed Rong Xiao. He could not help but laugh and said, "Oh, it's really you. Come, get up quickly." As he spoke, he walked over and made a gesture of supporting him with both hands. Receiving such treatment, Rong Xiao's face was naturally filled with joy. He stood up with a smile on his face. But soon this smile froze on his face because the next moment, a heavy punch hit his lower abdomen. With just one punch, he vomited all the food that he had just eaten. Rong Xiao's name could be said to be well known in the beginning city. Unfortunately, it was not a good reputation but a bad reputation. It was this person who became Baiming's lackey. He first persuaded Su Yuan and forced the entire new Second Army to surrender to Baiming. For this matter, Commander Tiger's Mane had given a strict order that if one day they could catch Rong Xiao, they should not be polite to him. Lu Zhuo naturally remembered this in his heart. He thought that this person was still abusing his power in Shajing City. He never thought that he would meet him here. How could he be polite? Of course he would teach him a lesson first. The miserable Rong Xiao was beaten up by Lu Zhuo on the spot. He knelt on the ground and vomited. He did not even have the strength to stand up. Lu Zhuo stopped and said to the soldiers beside him, "Come, lift him up and send him to Bugnam of Gojoseon for punishment." Without a leader, the 100,000 Baiming army could not form an effective resistance. Even if some of the Baiming army generals wanted to resist and make contributions, they could only resist for a few hours under the crazy attack of the 5-star army cavalry. In the end, they could not escape the fate of being surrounded and surrendered. Yang Chendong appeared at the gate of the first city with 1,000 black cavalry at noon. The first thing he saw was the captives of the Baiming army and the money and supplies that they did not have time to transport when they escaped. "Young master, it's a big harvest." Beta Persei looked at all this with a grin. Yang Chendong was also in a good mood. He thought that with 70,000 Liaodong iron cavalry and 50,000 Wala elite cavalry, even if they won this battle, they would have to pay a certain price. He did not expect that Shiheng was so afraid of death that he escaped so quickly. This was naturally because of the previous strategies that worked, but it also had a lot to do with the incompetence of the commander of the Baiming army. "Young master, young master." Not far away, a group of cavalry galloped over, and the shout could be heard clearly even though it was still far away. "It's Tiger's Head." Beta Persei had good eyesight and recognized the person who came. He was also excited. It had been more than 2 years since the last time they were separated. Anyone would be excited to see each other again. Especially Tiger's Mane, who came over on horseback, jumped off his horse when he was still more than 10 meters away from Yang Chendong and ran over. Facing this errand boy and servant who had accompanied him since he was a child, Yang Chendong was also filled with emotions, and his eyes involuntarily became gentle. "Young master, you're finally here." Tiger's Mane, who fell 10 feet in front of White Dragon, couldn't help but cry. "Quick, help Tiger's Head up." Yang Chendong couldn't stand to say this the most. He could see tens of thousands of soldiers fighting and even dying on the battlefield, but he just couldn't bear to see these men in tears. Beta Persei dismounted from his horse and helped Tiger's Mane, who was kneeling on the ground, up. Tiger's Mane, who seemed to have just calmed down, burst into tears again because of Yang Chendong's words. "You've worked hard." Unlike parting, Tiger's Mane was a person who would rather break than bend. He had even prepared to live and die with the first city. He also thought that he would never see the young master again in his life. At this time, seeing him again, one could imagine how excited he was. "Young master, you're becoming more and more mature and charming," Tiger's Mane couldn't help but say after looking up and sizing up Yang Chendong. When he first entered the capital of the great Ming dynasty, Yang Chendong was only a young man who was less than 20 years old. But now he was nearly 30 years old and was a mature middle-aged man. Even the corners of his mouth had grown a beard. How could people not be moved? "Haha, Tiger's Mane, your flattery skills have also improved." With Yang Chendong's laughter, the atmosphere at the scene suddenly became much more cheerful. After Tiger's Mane, Yang Si, Yu Mian, and the others came to greet him one by one. Yang Chendong gave each of them verbal encouragement, making them feel the warmth and importance of being close to them. After everyone greeted each other, they talked about the current situation of the battle. Tiger's Mane took the initiative to report, "Young master, except for more than 10,000 people who died or were injured in battle, the rest of the 100,000 Baiming army surrendered and were captured. Among them, the commander-in-chief, Rong Xiao, was also captured alive by us. You can do whatever you want with him." "Very good." Yang Chendong nodded happily. "This battle is much smoother than I thought. Everyone has put in a lot of effort and should be rewarded." Everyone chuckled when they heard this. However, only one person had a straight face. When he saw that Yang Chendong seemed to be in a good mood, he suddenly stepped forward and said, "King, I don't want to be rewarded. I only request to participate in the hunting mission." Please allow it. The person who spoke was the commander of the new light cavalry, Ma Xiangshan. It was obvious that he was still angry about being stopped by the Liaodong cavalry. This time he wanted to take revenge. When Ma Xiangshan first met Yang Qindong, they were still at High Town. At that time, he had shown his strength and questioned Yang Qindong's horsemanship. In the end, it ended with the white dragon being subdued. After not seeing each other for many years, the moment he opened his mouth, it was as if he was in a difficult position. Tiger's Mane, Yang Si, Yumian, and the others were all shocked and angrily rebuked him. Today Yang Qindong was no longer the Yang Qindong of High Town. He was now the Bugnam of Gojoseon. The territory he had was comparable to the Great Ming Dynasty, and the number of troops he had was enough to dominate the Great Ming Dynasty. How could he allow others to question the military plans he made? If Yang Qindong became angry and punished Ma Xiangshan, no one would be able to say anything. Chapter 1184. Commander Ma, what are you doing? Hurry up and apologize to the king. Tiger's Mane was the first to speak. It was clear that he still cared for and valued this person. Commander Ma, hurry up and apologize. Yumian, Yang Si, and the others also spoke up. Lu Zhuar and the others, who felt that they had lost face, also hurriedly winked at Ma Xiangshan, reminding him within the appropriate range. Seeing that everyone was reprimanding him and showing concern for him, Ma Xiangshan realized that he had caused trouble. Yang Qindong was not Tiger's Mane, who could voice out his opinions in person. He immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Yang Qindong. King, please forgive this subordinate's reckless words. Young master, you see, Ma Xiangshan's temper is like this. He speaks without thinking. In fact, he doesn't mean anything else, and he doesn't mean to question your decision. Please forgive his reckless behavior. Yes, Commander Ma is usually a good person. He is loyal and reliable and does things seriously. Yang Si is willing to vouch for him. He did not mean to be disrespectful. Yang Si also spoke up at this moment, and his knees went soft as he knelt on the ground. The originally happy and harmonious scene instantly became like this. Everyone didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Yang Qindong's expression did not change, but he lamented in his heart. In the past, he always heard people say that it was lonely at the top and that an emperor would not have any friends. He never believed it. However, everything that happened in front of him vividly taught him a lesson. It made him understand that now everyone was actively keeping a distance from him. This might be a show of respect. However, from now on, it would not be so easy for him to be friends with these people and hear some truth. Young master, look. Seeing that Yang Qindong did not speak for a long time and even his brother Yang Si was kneeling on the ground to plead for Ma Xiangshan, Beta Persei finally could not hold it in anymore. He asked tentatively in a low voice with a pleading expression on his face. Wuxia. When Yang Qindong saw Beta Persei's reaction, he finally could not help but laugh out loud. He then pointed at the crowd and said, "What are you doing? What are you all doing? Do you really think that just because I, the young master, am in a higher position will become estranged?" Commander Ma only gave a suggestion. He didn't do anything. Why should I punish him? Why don't you all get up? Yang Qindong said with a smile on his face. Obviously he was not angry. Tiger's Man and the others let out a sigh of relief, but at the same time, they did not deliberately remind Ma Xiangshan to thank him. Ma Xiangshan was very clear that his actions just now were very uncomfortable. This time his apology was sincere. Your Majesty, it's all my fault. I didn't think before speaking. Thank you for your forgiveness. Well, it's not a big deal. Besides, Commander Ma gave a military suggestion. This is what a military officer should do. There's nothing wrong with it. Not to mention it's very reasonable. We sent too few cavalry to chase after them. Since the new army is made up of cavalry, of course they should perform better. Not only was Yang Qindong not angry, but he also took the initiative to say what everyone wanted to say. For a moment, everyone's eyes gathered on him again. According to the military action plan that Yang Qindong had previously set, considering that the new army had been fighting for so many days, once the battle started and they broke through the joint defense line of the Baiming army and the Wala army, what they had to do was to capture prisoners and clean up the battlefield. Relatively speaking, this task was the easiest and safest. It was also beneficial for the new army to quickly recover their strength. But now, the Baiming army's front line was broken through so easily. This was really beyond Yang Qindong's expectations. Because of this, some changes could be made to the previous military plan. Noticing that everyone was looking at him with hopeful eyes, Yang Qindong asked seriously, after being besieged for so long and with the lack of food, are you sure that your strength hasn't declined and you can participate in the next tough battle? No problem. In just an instant, all the division-level generals of the new army spoke in unison. Ignoring everyone's answer, Yang Qindong's eyes fell on Tiger's mane. He wanted to hear his opinion. He didn't want to blindly agree because these people wanted to show off. Once there was a problem, it would be a big problem. Tiger's mane obviously understood what Yang Qindong meant. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he lowered his head and pondered for a moment. Then he raised his head and said, "Young master, most of them don't have any problems. Although the siege seems dangerous as cavalry, they don't really have many opportunities to go up the city tower. In addition, Yangtze took out the stored food half a month ago. During this period of time, everyone's physical strength has been replenished. They can accept the mission of continuous battle." Well, you said that most of them don't have any problems. That means that some of them have problems. Tell me which divisions need to stay behind. Yang Qindong understood the hidden meaning in Tiger's mane's words. He also needed someone to stay behind to clean up the battlefield and look after the prisoners. He couldn't let the new army rush up at once. If that happened, what would happen to the safety of the beginning city? Yes, young master. I personally think that the 1st Cavalry Division and the 2nd Cavalry Division should stay behind. The other divisions can join the battle immediately. Tiger's mane didn't even turn his head. He could even imagine that his subordinates would definitely look at him with hopeful gazes. However, it was good to want to render meritorious service. However, if they didn't have enough strength and forcefully stood out, it wouldn't be meritorious service but courting death. When he mentioned the 1st Cavalry Division and the 2nd Cavalry Division, Lu Zhua and Deng Yu's expressions immediately became very ugly. However, they had nothing to say. Previously, when they were defending the city, the 70,000 soldiers that Yangtze had prepared couldn't hold on any longer. The two divisions even abandoned their horses and rushed up the city tower. Only then did they protect the city. Because of this, their losses weren't small. Now, it was most appropriate for them to stay behind to defend the city and look after the prisoners. After Tiger's mane finished speaking, no one objected. Yang Qindong knew that this should be a result that everyone could accept. He immediately said, "Very good. If that's the case, the 1st Cavalry Division and the 2nd Cavalry Division will stay behind. Heavy Cavalry Regiment, listen to my orders. You are ordered to wander around Tulu City. If you find any Baiming army that wants to come out, fight them back. If there are too many enemy soldiers, you can return to the beginning city at any time to ask for reinforcements." Yes. The Heavy Cavalry Regiment's commander, Windchaser, immediately agreed excitedly. Light Cavalry Regiment and Reconnaissance Regiment, rest for a while. After that, you will set off with this king and kill your way to the Hanoi area. This time we will make the Wara Wara pay the price. I want Yeshin's head. Yang Qindong's voice became louder and louder as he spoke. The two commanders, Ma Xiong-shan and Ding Shan, immediately agreed loudly. As the war went surprisingly smoothly, Yang Qindong's vision was no longer limited to taking back the lost cities. Instead, he wanted to make a crusade against his enemies and opponents. And this time, his target was the leader of the Wara Wara, Yes Hen. Although Baiming was also an opponent, after all, they had a deep foundation and were powerful. If he tangled with them now, he didn't know how many troops and time he would have to invest. This was not in line with Yang Qindong's current development goal. It was better to let go of the opponent first and clench his fists to deal with Yes Hen first. Of course, if Baiming didn't know what was good for them and still came out to mess things up, then he didn't mind fighting a few more battles with them. The new army's military plan had been adjusted. Everyone went to prepare. Using these few hours of reorganization, Yang Qindong came to the big tent outside the city. He separately received the Far Eastern Army's commander Qin Bo, Mabe Division's commander Xan Honghai, Na Raizong and the Mongolian generals who had joined the 5-star army. During the process of receiving them, Yang Qindong gave full recognition and praise to everyone's performance, making every general feel a sense of importance. When everyone walked out of the tent, their faces were full of satisfaction and excitement. Especially at the end, when Yang Qindong sacrificed himself to analyze the situation for them, it made them have a clearer understanding of the next step and plan. For example, the Far Eastern Army's commander Qin Bo, Yang Qindong straightforwardly asked him to rush back to the Far Eastern province. The environment there was complicated, and they couldn't lack the deterrence of the army. Of course, this time they didn't come in vain. After the supply line was opened, soon new supplies would be sent from the sea through the Liaodong region. This time, when Qin Bo and the others returned, they could send a large number of logistical supplies back. This would play a very positive role in speeding up the development of the Far Eastern province. 6th Young Master, I will leave you a division. Next we will deal with Yeshen of the Wara. He is not an easy person to deal with. Of course, the more the better. I also want to let my soldiers see the true style of the 5-star Army's cavalry. Qin Bo was in favor of withdrawing the army back to the Far Eastern province. Originally, this time he came here to launch a surprise attack and rescue the heavily injured Mo Bay City and Shur City. Now that the mission was completed, of course he had to go back. However, he still hoped to leave a division behind so that they could learn more from Yang Qindong. In the face of Qin Bo's request, Yang Qindong thought about it for a while and agreed. No matter what, he was still the commander of an army. Moreover, he stayed in that bitter cold place all year round. If he made a request, he would have to fulfill it. After Qin Bo left a division behind, Narisong was also allowed to bring 20,000 Mongolian cavalry to participate in the next battle. Yang Qindong only had one request for him, and that was to follow orders. Since those small Mongolian tribes wanted to have a share of the pie in the war, they must obey orders and follow orders. If they couldn't do this, then they should leave as soon as possible. Now Yang Xie didn't have to rely on these small Mongolian tribes. Chapter 1185. Yang Xie's continued growth and economic development, especially after defeating the Baiming army and the world of Wara, made the small Mongolian tribes see the rise of a powerful 5-star army, a new force. They could only look up to the 5-star army and didn't dare to have the slightest disrespect. After knowing that the order was personally given by Bugnam of Gojoseon, no one dared to refuse. They all said that they would obey the military order, and some even directly said that they wanted to join the 5-star army. In their opinion, finding a strong backer would be more beneficial to their tribe's future development. For those who wanted to rely on him, Yang Qindong didn't have no choice but to accept all of them. He asked Yang Heir to investigate carefully and make sure that their strength could play a role before accepting them. On the contrary, some of the small tribe leaders who had their own plans were already dead in Yang Qindong's heart. For the future generations, he wouldn't allow other armed forces to exist under his rule. Even if they were to rely on him, he wouldn't allow them to join the 5-star army. He also had to disrupt their original organization, which meant that he had to completely eat them up. In the future, people who joined him and rebelled often happened, and it happened more than once. It also caused a lot of headaches for those who thought that they were broad-minded. Yang Qindong didn't want to make this kind of mistake again. Either they were completely used by the 5-star army, or they were completely destroyed. There was no third choice. Of course, this wasn't something that could be done just by saying it. If he wanted to do this, it would take a long time. What Yang Qindong needed to do was to shorten this process as much as possible and completely unify the entire Mongolian grassland. After meeting the generals and assigning them their respective tasks, the last person Yang Qindong met was the captured Baiming general, or more precisely the businessman Rong Xiao. This businessman who used the commercial resources of the 5-star army and relied on his identity as a Han to make a fortune. Now, he actually used the money he earned from the 5-star army to deal with the 5-star army. With this kind of two-faced character, Yang Qindong couldn't tolerate him. He had to kill him as an example to those who had bad intentions. Rong Xiao, who was tied up, was like a fat pig that was about to be slaughtered. He was tied to a piece of wood and carried into the tent. As he entered, a fishy stench spread throughout the tent. Beta Persei, who was standing on the side, wrinkled his nose, asked with an unhappy expression, "What's going on? Did you throw him into a cesspool?" Second brother, no, he was so scared that he peed and pooped. I just gave him a simple wash, but I didn't expect him to pee again. Longwei's captain, Ba Daojiang, who was responsible for bringing him in, said with a face full of disdain, "You dare to make an enemy out of our 5-star army with just this little bit of ability?" Knowing that this was all because Rong Xiao was too cowardly, Yang Heir snorted unhappily. Yang Qindong's expression was normal. In the past, in order to complete a mission, he had come into contact with all kinds of environments. It was just some strange smells, it really didn't make him feel any discomfort. He first looked at Rong Xiao, who had fainted from fright, and nodded. "Come, wake him up." What? A large bucket of cold water was then handed over to Rong Xiao. A wave of coldness directly stimulated him, causing him to struggle and shout loudly. Don't kill me, I'm willing to surrender to the 5-star army, I'm willing to serve the grandfathers of the 5-star army." Rong Xiao really didn't have a backbone. If it was said that he was tortured by Longwei for a period of time, He was already scared out of his wits at this moment, and he couldn't help but shout when he woke up. After shouting for a while, he found that no one was paying attention to him. Only then did he have the courage to open his eyes and look at the surroundings. He saw Bugnam of Gojoseon Yang Qindong sitting at the head of the tent, wearing a golden robe. Bugnam of Gojoseon. Rong Xiao, who was once met by Yang Qindong because he was a businessman, immediately recognized Bugnam of Gojoseon's identity, and his eyes flashed with panic and surprise. Speaking of which, he felt sorry for Bugnam. Now that Bugnam of Gojoseon had found him, he was not afraid. But he believed even more that the King of Hell was easy to meet, and the little devils were hard to deal with. Compared to those Long Wei who used various means to deal with him, he believed that Yang Qindong should be easier to talk to, because people with such an identity would not take him seriously. As long as the other party was happy, he might be let go like a fart. Thinking of this, Rong Xiao, who was lying on the ground, suddenly got up and came to a place 5 meters in front of Yang Qindong at a fast speed. He kowtowed to the ground. Bugnam of Gojoseon, I was wrong. Please be magnanimous and spare my life. I promise that the Rong family will completely obey your orders in the future and work for the 5-star army. I will be your dog in the future and I will bite whoever you ask me to. By the way, our Rong family has been doing business for generations and we have a lot of connections in Biming. If you want to do something, we will definitely do it well and won't let you down. I only ask that you spare my life to show your magnanimity and magnanimity. I believe that many people will join you. Rong Xiao deserved to be a businessman. When he said these words, he didn't even stutter. It was as if these words had been rehearsed by him many times in his heart. The Rong family had indeed been doing business for generations. They had experienced being looked down upon by others at the beginning, and now they had a wide influence. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been conferred the title of general and could lead 100,000 soldiers just because they had done one thing. It was a good thing for the 5-star army and Yang Qindong to have such a congenial person. With them around, he would be able to gain a better understanding of the northern Ming dynasty. Or if it was another person, he would nod and agree. Unfortunately, he met Yang Qindong. It was because of Rong Xiao that the new Second Army had experienced a tragedy. Even among the captives in the Battle of the First City, many people who were originally from the new Second Army had been captured. Some of them had really betrayed Biming while some of them hadn't. It was just that the environment had forced them to work hard for Biming in order to survive. It was because of Rong Xiao that the commander and the others had experienced a humiliation that they would never forget in their lives. This kind of approach was often more uncomfortable than killing them. If it weren't for Yang Qindong's enough trust in the commander, he and the entire new Second Army would not have a good ending. It was because of Rong Xiao that the 100,000 people in Shajing City and Jingzhou City had not seen the sun for several months. The happy smile on their faces in the past had disappeared. Instead, they were living like walking corpses. No one wanted to experience the feeling of going from heaven to hell again. It was because of Rong Xiao that the guard captain Wu Xiaoyi had to die to show his loyalty. Such a loyal person who protected his master was killed by this villain in front of him. It was because of Rong Xiao that the two cities had to temporarily rely on Biming in order to survive. Because of this, Biming and the War of Wara had no scruples and could besiege the first city. So many good soldiers had died tragically. It was because of Rong Xiao. There were many more that Yang Qindong didn't want to say or think about. And all of this was because of Rong Xiao's personal reasons. In the face of such a person who could be said to have committed a heinous crime, even if there was a flower in the sky, how could he forgive him? Compared to the benefits of getting along well with the Rong family, if Rong Xiao didn't die, how many people would be disappointed? How could he face the heroes who died in the defense of the first city and the soldiers of the new Second Army? Rong Xiao must die. This was the ending that no one could change, but he shouldn't die here but in Shajing City. It should be handled by Biming and the others. Take him down and send him to the new Second Army. It's okay as long as he doesn't die in the process. These words had already represented Rong Xiao's ending. There was even a hidden meaning in the words, that was, he would let everyone torture Rong Xiao along the way as long as Rong Xiao didn't die. It was best to let him suffer a fate worse than death, and let him know what would happen if he offended the 5-star army. It was almost time and Yang Qindong was ready to set off with the army. In contrast, the Wara had run for several hours. Although Tian Hu and the others had already chased after them, they were alone and didn't bring enough money and food, so they couldn't be at ease. Order the new 1st Army Reconnaissance Regiment to be the left vanguard, responsible for the safety of the left wing. Order the new 1st Army Light Cavalry Regiment to be the right vanguard, responsible for the safety of the right wing. order the 20,000 Mongolian troops led by Nari Song and the 1st Cavalry Division of the Far Eastern Army Dai Qua to be the middle. Order the 4th Army Division to be the rear, escorting the army's money and food. Set off. In the big tent, Yang Qindong shook his arm and shouted. More than 50,000 troops went south from the first city. Looking at the back of the army, the new 1st Army commander, Tiger's Mane, was filled with emotion. The 5-star army has completely grown up. Yes, but our future mission is still a long way to go. Yu Mian, the lord of the first city, also sighed. Don't be emotional at this time. We still have too many things to do. Reorganizing the captive army and preparing to receive the new supplies, we still need the cooperation of the army commander and the lord of the first army. Yang Si chuckled, looking quite proud. It was no wonder that he was so happy. More than 70,000 Wala cavalry, more than 90,000 Baiming infantrymen, and nearly 70,000 infantrymen from Shirwanshan's headquarters. This was more than 200,000 troops, and now they all needed to be reorganized. This task mostly fell on him, the logistics division commander. Although the task was heavy, he was very happy. With so many troops, he could do a lot of things in the future. Don't worry, we will fully support you if you need anything. Yu Mian also said with a smile. But at the same time, he didn't forget to put forward a condition. It's just that the inner and outer walls of the first city have been damaged in this battle. With so many laborers, can Division Commander Yang Si help me? That's not a problem. We don't have anything else now, but we have people. Yang Si laughed. At this moment, not only him but Tiger's Mane and Yu Mian also laughed together. Chapter 1186. Compared to the joy of the new army, at this time Shirheng was leading the army to strengthen the defense of Tulu city. In the battle outside the beginning city, the Baiming army was defeated and retreated. Rong Xiao's 100,000 troops were all captured by the 5-star army. Not only that, he just received news that Shajing and Jingzhou city were once again controlled by the 5-star army's new 2nd army and returned to the embrace of Bugnam of Gojoseon. All kinds of unfavorable news came, and Shirheng's face became very ugly. He already knew that this attack on the grasslands had ended in failure. He didn't dare to imagine what kind of reaction the emperor would have once he knew this news. What he had to do now was to mend the pen after the sheep were lost and find someone to take the blame. Shirheng's earliest preparation was to let Tsingguang, who retreated first, take the blame. For this reason he also ordered Tsingguang, who retreated to Tulu city, to be arrested. Now he was in the dungeon's interrogation room. He hoped that he could use his words to persuade the other party to take all the blame. This way his responsibility as the commander would be reduced by a lot. In order to strengthen his power, Shirheng also invited Fang Dingshan over. The two of them interrogated one person together, which was enough to give Tsingguang face. Bring people to commit the crime. Shirheng said with some momentum as he slammed the wooden block on the desk. Bring people to commit? What? Oh. The group of Yamen runners standing on both sides also shouted loudly, raising the tense atmosphere to the extreme. In the midst of the shouting, Tsingguang, shackled, walked into the hall under the protection of two bailiffs. Although he was still far away, the clattering sound could be heard. The shouts continued as if to create an extremely tense atmosphere. Shirheng, who was sitting behind the desk, was already waiting to see Tsingguang's current appearance. Tsingguang's face would definitely turn pale, and he would kneel down and beg for mercy the moment he saw him. If that was the case, wouldn't Tsingguang have to say whatever he wanted him to say? The greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. Tsingguang finally appeared, but he did not show the slightest sign of fear. Instead, he looked lazy and sleepy. When he saw Shirheng and Fang Dingshan, he even yawned and said with a smile, "Sigh, even if I caught the wrong person, I shouldn't have let Marquis and General Fang come here personally. I'm really flattered." He did not seem to be afraid at all. On the contrary, he was so calm. In the eyes of Shirheng and Fang Dingshan, they were surprised. The two of them first looked at each other. After confirming that the person who came was Tsingguang, Shirheng suddenly picked up the wooden block and said, "Tsingguang, don't pretend to be crazy here. Marquis is asking you, do you know your crime?" The sound of the wooden block reverberated in the interrogation room. It was quite imposing. However, this was nothing to Tsingguang, who was like a hob. He could even laugh and said, "Crime? What crime have I committed?" "You." Shirheng was really angered by Tsingguang's shameless behavior. He pointed at him and said, "You led the troops to retreat without a military order, which led to our defeat in the Battle of Beginning City. Isn't this enough to sentence you to death?" Is there such a thing? Sun Guang said with an obedient look. What? You dare to do it but you don't dare to admit it? Deputy Commander Sun, this is not what a man should do. Fang Dingshan, the deputy judge at the side, finally spoke. He could not stand the kind of generals who fled in the face of battle. They were obviously not very capable, but they were in a high position. Such people were like vermin and were really hateful. Facing Fang Dingshan's interrogation, Sun Guang was also not anxious. General Fang, who are you talking about? From what I know, when faced with the charge of the 5-star army, you didn't even fire a single arrow before retreating. Could it be that your actions are what a man should do? At this moment, Fang Dingshan's face flushed red. He was actually being questioned in return. He was not as thick-skinned as Sun Guang, who could be indifferent in the face of questioning. Although he was greedy for money, he also cherished his reputation. He immediately said angrily, "Bullshit." The reason why the Liaodong cavalry retreated was because Admiral Shi gave a military order. We followed the order and also to preserve the strength of our Baiming army. If that's the case, then I also retreated to preserve my strength. Sun Guang was good with words and directly used the other party's reason to explain his actions. This is not the same. Fang Dingshan said angrily. I retreated because I received the Admiral's order. You didn't? You think I didn't do it just because you said so? Ask Marquis, didn't you give me the order to retreat first? Sun Guang ignored Fang Dingshan and looked at Shi Heng, who was sitting on the other side. The situation is like this. When the Admiral saw that Rong Xiao, who was the vanguard, didn't know how to command and fight, and was the first to escape, he relied on his many years of experience on the battlefield. In order to preserve more strength, he immediately gave the order for the entire army to retreat. It was under this order that our Great Tong Army and General Fang's Liaodong cavalry took the opportunity to retreat back to Tulu City. This sealed off the 5-star army's entrance to Baiming, and at the same time preserved the strength of the army. In this battle, Marquis' command wasn't wrong. The mistake was Shi Wanshan's betrayal, the Wara's escape, and Rong Xiao's cowardice. This made the opportunity to severely damage the 5-star army and even capture Bugnam of Gojoseon go to waste. There was no mistake in the command and preparation of this battle. Marquis and General Fang, was that not the case? As if he was telling a story, Sun Guang's words were full of chapters and chapters as he narrated the entire story. Shi Heng and Fang Dingshan were stunned when they heard this. If they didn't experience it themselves, they would also think that this was what happened. Without waiting for the two to react, Sun Guang continued, "Of course, if the two of you insist that I am guilty, then there is another explanation. Admiral Shi didn't know how to maintain a good relationship between the two armies, so the Wara suddenly retreated at a critical moment. Admiral Shi and Fang Dingshan saw that the situation was going to change, so in order to protect their own lives, they forced Rong Xiao to lead 100,000 soldiers to their deaths. Only Vice-General Sun Guang saw the problem, but because they had been besieging the city for many days, their strength was limited, so in order to preserve the strength of the army, they had no choice but to retreat first. Unfortunately, in order to cover up the truth, Admiral Shi killed all the witnesses and pushed all the blame to Sun Guang. In the blink of an eye, it was a completely different explanation. After saying this, Sun Guang intentionally shrugged and said, "Right, I've already written a memorial for the second explanation. As long as I don't leave this place today, someone will send it to Baiming. When the time comes, His Majesty will definitely see it. Perhaps he won't believe it, or perhaps he will. In that case, everything will be up to the heavens. Naturally, the choice is still in the hands of the two of you. Do as you see fit." At this moment, Sun Guang was extremely relaxed. He didn't seem like a criminal at all. On the contrary, he seemed more like an interrogator. The second explanation was like a heavy hammer to Shi Heng and Fang Dingshan's heads. The two of them couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Only now did they realize that they had somewhat underestimated this Sun Guang in the past. It turned out that this was a smart person. They didn't know that everything Sun Guang did was the idea given to him by Su Dei, and this idea came from Yang Qindong. No wonder Shi Heng and Fang Dingshan were stunned. In this battle, Su Dei originally wanted to take the opportunity to return to the embrace of the 5-star army. He was even confident that he could capture Sun Guang and make a great contribution. However, this was not what Yang Qindong wanted. A good-for-nothing general like Sun Guang would not be an obstacle to Yang Qindong's unification of the world. On the contrary, having such a person Baiming would only be beneficial and not harmful to him. Once he captured him, not only would he not be able to severely damage the strength of the Baiming army, but he would also help the other party to eliminate villains. Why would Yang Qindong do that? As for Su Dei, he played an unparalleled role in the battle outside the beginning city. It was better for such a person to continue to stay in the Baiming army. At least now was not the time for him to come to the 5-star army. Of course, Yang Qindong would remember all these contributions in his heart. Once he returned one day, he would definitely give them a position that he was satisfied with. Having said that, Sun Guang's 2 statements entered the ears of the 2 generals. As long as one was not stupid, one would naturally know how to choose. Although there was a hint of being threatened, whether it was Shi Heng or Fang Dingshan, they were the kind of people who cared about their reputation. They absolutely did not want to have a scandal, let alone lose the imperial favor. In the end, the 2 looked at each other and laughed. Then Shi Heng said, "Deputy Commander Tsin is indeed a pillar of the country. It seems that everything is really a misunderstanding. Come, quickly remove the shackles." Sun Guang was released just like that. The explanation to the outside world was that his withdrawal was originally approved by the admiral. It was just that he withdrew too quickly, so it caused a misunderstanding. Following that, Sun Guang's first statement was written into a memorial to the emperor and reported to the Daizong emperor. The 50,000 cavalrymen of Walla were like a black whirlwind on the grassland, heading straight toward Shajing city. At the most critical moment, Yeshen was the first to withdraw his troops. He did not dare to gamble. He did not dare to believe in his ally, the Baiming army, which led to a great defeat outside the beginning city. Of course, the Baiming army was defeated. They lost 100,000 troops. For Yeshen, it was just some provisions that could not be taken away because he was in a hurry. When he returned to Hanoi and gathered his general, Bo Muir, provisions would not be a problem. Leader, the fast horse scouts reported that the 5-star army is still chasing us 50 miles behind us. They have not given up. General Chao Lu rode to Yeshen's side and reported in a hurry. Chapter 1187. They're still chasing? How many people do they have? Yeshen's face flashed with anger. He had already been defeated, but he was still the first army to retreat. This was giving enough face to the 5-star army. Moreover, when he attacked the beginning city, he didn't use a single soldier, saber, or sword. On the contrary, he even lost 100,000 soldiers when he attacked North Desert City. No matter how he looked at it, he was the one who suffered a loss. Why was the 5-star army so tightly holding on to him and not letting him go? Replying to the leader, they have about 50,000 people. They have more people than us. Among them, there is also the existence of the most elite existence like the 1st Cavalry Division. When Chao Lu answered these questions, he felt a chill down his spine. Unlike Baiming and Southern Ming, where most of the soldiers were infantry, the 1st Cavalry Division was in the limelight in the grasslands where the majority of the soldiers were cavalry. It was not something that other tribes and forces could compare to. A person's name was like a tree's shadow. For many people in the grasslands, the 1st Cavalry Division represented a destructive existence. Continue to retreat. When he heard that the other side had more people than him, and that there was the existence of the invincible elite existence like the 1st Cavalry Division, Yeshen lost the desire to compete. He helplessly shook his head and gave the order to continue the retreat. Reporting. Just as Yeshen gave the order, the fast horse scout in front of him came in front of him again. Reporting to the leader, there is a group of cavalry with the banner of the 5-star army 30 miles in front of us. They are blocking our way. There is a 5-star army cavalry in front of us? Yeshen was shocked by this news. Leader, it should be the 5-star army's new 2nd army. Chao Lu thought of something and whispered to Yeshen. Slapping his forehead, Yeshen nodded. That's right, it should be them. The useless Baiming. After conquering 2 cities, don't they know how to completely destroy the new 2nd army? Now they've become popular again. Yes, the Baiming army is too incompetent. But chief, now that they are targeting us, what should we do? Chao Lu was also complaining about the incompetence of the Baiming army, but now was not the time to complain. Instead, he had to face the problem. What else can we do? Let's split up and meet the enemy. The rest of the cavalry will circle around them and rush back to Hanoi. Helplessly he said. In the past, if a mere new 2nd army dared to stop 50,000 elite cavalrymen from Wara, Yeshen would definitely teach them a lesson. But now he couldn't take such a risk. Once his main force was entangled with the enemy, the 5-star army cavalry would catch up to him. If that happened, he wouldn't be able to escape even if he wanted to. This was to strengthen the soil and break the wrist. Chao Lu asked carefully, Chief, how many people should we send to meet the enemy? Everyone knew that the cavalrymen sent to meet the new 2nd army would never return. But the number of people was the key. If there were too few, it wouldn't be effective. If there were too many, the losses would be too great. It was not a good choice. Send 20,000 soldiers. After all, the new Second Army's strength is greatly damaged. If we send more people, they might be able to rush out and meet up with us in Hanoi. Yes, Hen was indeed an ambitious person. Without even thinking about it, he betrayed all 20,000 of his men. The so-called sending more people to defeat the new Second Army was just an excuse. In the end, Yes Hen was afraid that if he sent too few people, they wouldn't be able to entangle the new Second Army and affect his escape plan. Chao Lu was naturally aware of this point. But this was the chief's order, so he had to carry it out. He immediately agreed and went to make the arrangements. We'll leave from the sides. Yes Hen said with heartache. When they came with 150,000 soldiers. But when they returned, they only had 30,000 men and horses. They even lost their provisions. This was an undeniable defeat. In front of the small yellow river in front of Shajing City, the new Second Army was laying in ambush here, waiting for the Wara Wara cavalrymen to escape here. They wanted to take advantage of the situation and kill them. Report. General, the Wara cavalry has split up. 30,000 of them left from the flanks. About 20,000 of them are heading straight for us. The scout in charge of scouting turned back and reported to the general standing in front of the army. Understood. Spy nodded with a solemn expression. Obviously, this situation was completely within his expectations. The enemy has split up, so the pressure on us has decreased a lot. Now we're only dealing with 20,000 cavalrymen. Everyone must cheer up and show the might of the new Second Army. Yes. Kang Ji and the other two division commanders replied loudly. In fact, even if there were 20,000 Wala cavalry, it would still be a huge pressure for the new Second Army. After going through so many things, the new Second Army was now short of an infantry division, and the other three divisions were not complete. At most, there were only 18,000 soldiers. Moreover, the number of horses in the army was not enough. Many of the original cavalrymen had to be converted to infantry because of the lack of horses. Kang Ji looked at his subordinates who were supposed to have more than 8,000 cavalrymen, but now there were only about 4,000 cavalrymen and 2,000 infantry. He couldn't help but curse. It's all because of those damn Baiming. They stole our horses. Otherwise, with the strength of the new Second Army, it would be easy to deal with 20,000 cavalrymen. Okay, Mr. Kong, don't complain. Save some strength to deal with the enemy. Go and check on the preparation of the bows and arrows. She understood Kang Ji's frustration. How could he not be the same? However, this was a war. It was not a war where two people could curse each other. It was not a war where one could win by talking. Although Su Yuan betrayed the five-star army and ended up with his corpse, he still did some good things. For example, a large number of military supplies were stored in Shajing City. Among them, bows and caltrops were the most abundant. Considering that the most likely enemy on the grassland was the cavalrymen, the Baiming army was well prepared. Because the Baiming army was mainly attacking the beginning city this time, many of the equipment that was used to deal with the cavalrymen were temporarily not used. They were left in the city. This time, the new Second Army benefited. Commander, don't worry. The bows and arrows are ready. We also prepared 400 meters of caltrops. I guarantee that the enemy's cavalrymen will suffer heavy losses. Kang Ji's face was full of confidence when he said this. Good. This is a turnaround for the five-star army. Although we were forced to do what we did before, it is inevitable that some of our brothers will have some opinions about us. Now is the time to prove everything with actions. There must not be any problems. She nodded heavily and said. Now everything was ready. They only lacked the east wind. 4 hours later, the east wind, which was the enemy, appeared. Looking from afar, it was as if they covered the sky and the earth. People said that there were more than 10,000 soldiers. When 20,000 cavalrymen came from afar, the battle formation could not be described with words. Prepare for battle. Archers, get ready. Kang Ji, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, rode on his horse and shouted loudly. There were 6,000 archers in the 3 divisions. They were waiting for the enemy to arrive at the designated location so that they could launch a fatal attack. The earth shook and shouts shook the sky. 20,000 elite cavalrymen of the Wala Empire came from afar, shouting slogans that only the people of the grassland could understand. When the distance between them was still 800 meters, they began to perform all kinds of equestrian tactical movements. They either hid their bodies on the side of the warhorse, or bent their bodies over the horse to minimize the area of their exposed body parts. Or they knocked their bows and arrows and prepared to launch a counterattack on the horse. This was an evenly matched battle. There were no tricks to be played. The reason why it was said to be evenly matched was because the Wala cavalry had the advantage in terms of numbers. It was just that they had limited time to fight. If it wasn't for the fact that the elite cavalry of the 5-star army were rushing over, the 20,000 Wala cavalry would not have used such a method of charging. Instead, they would have attacked from the left, middle and right. Only then would they be able to maximize their advantage in numbers. However, time did not allow for it. They had no choice but to use the wolf pack tactic. The so-called wolf pack tactic could also be called a swarm. It was like a pack of wolves. Once they saw the target, they would tear it into pieces and finally complete the mission of killing and defeating the enemy. It could be said that the ancient cavalry battles were very dangerous. It was about the coordination of tactics, the advantage in numbers, and the use of geographical and weather conditions. Of course, the morale of the two armies and the weapons used would also directly affect the final result of the battle. As for the battle between the two armies, it was almost impossible for both sides to fight. Unless it was under special circumstances, neither side would choose to do so. It was very difficult to train a general. It required a lot of resources and time. How could they sacrifice themselves in a battle like this? This was just something that movies and TV dramas did on purpose. The 20,000 Wala army's cavalrymen were approaching step by step, and their speed was very fast. Their forces were also very scattered. It gave people a feeling that they did not know where to start. It was as if the attack was not the main point and the attack was the main point. This was the essence of the wolfpack tactic. It made the opponent confused and could only choose to attack. In this way, if they did not deal with it well, they could be defeated like a mountain. The reason why the Wala cavalry chose to attack like this was because they had the advantage in numbers. They were thinking of ways to expand their advantage and achieve the military goal of winning the battle. Archers scatter. 300 in a squadron, 100 in a small squad. Adopt a stacked attack. Kangji was not someone to be trifled with. Seeing that the opponent was about to expand their advantage in numbers, he was not willing to let it go. He immediately adopted the corresponding countermeasures. Chapter 1188. After the order was given, the 6,000 archers were divided into 20 formations. Each formation had 300 archers and 100 archers would fire at the same time. After the first row fired their arrows, the second row, then the third row, and the first row readied themselves. The cycle repeated itself to achieve the goal of constantly firing arrows. By the time the archers' formation had completely dispersed, the Wa'al cavalry was less than 5 li away. At this moment, Shibi's eyes were wide open as he looked forward. He wanted to see the iron caltrops display their might. Charge! Kill! Kill these lambs! Ah! The battle cries were still coming from all directions. The distance between the two groups increased from 500 meters to 450 meters, then 430 meters, 410 meters, 400 meters. Finally, they arrived at the battlefield of the iron caltrops. The sound of horses falling to the ground could be heard. The caltrops had 6 horns so they could stand upright no matter where they were thrown. They were also very sharp. Once the caltrops hit a horse's foot, it could be pierced through even if the horse was hit by an iron palm. This was the advantage and power of the caltrops. The Wala cavalry did not expect the new Second Army to use this tactic. In their opinion, this attack was simply a rash move by the new Second Army. They shouldn't have made more preparations. Otherwise, they wouldn't have adopted the tactic of charging at the beginning. At least, they should have sent some people to test the waters first. They did not expect the Wala cavalry to be hit by the caltrops. None of the Wala cavalry in the front could dodge the caltrops. A short distance of 100 meters was enough to knock down 2,000 Wala cavalry. The momentum of their charge was also halted. The caltrops were limited. In the era when iron was precious, the caltrops were very expensive. Even Biming did not prepare a lot of them. The caltrops could only cover a distance of 100 meters. After this distance, the Wala cavalry adjusted their posture and started to charge again. When they were about 200 meters ahead and had just picked up their speed, the arrows came from afar. Like a dense rain of attacks, Division Commander Kang Ji gave the order to release the word fire. Ding ding dang dang dang. The arrows flew through the air for over 100 meters before landing on the bodies of the cavalrymen or their war horses. In an instant, there was another scene of men and horses being thrown off their feet. At least 1,000 cavalrymen fell to the ground from the arrows. Cavalry, get ready. Seeing that the 2 waves of preparation had the effect of injuring and obstructing the enemy, Kang Ji's heroic spirit soared. After a shout, he pulled out the sharp saber on his body. Tip of the arrow, charge at the enemy formation. Archers use protective fire. Charge. Kang Ji, who was issuing military orders, was the first to rush out of the battle formation. This also meant that the new Second Army's counterattack had officially begun. Relying on the caltrops and archers to obstruct the enemy, they effectively suppressed the Wala cavalry's advance. Kang Ji gave the order to launch an all-out attack. It could be said that he grasped the timing very well. Seeing all this, Song Bi nodded in satisfaction. Song Bi clenched his fists tightly because he knew that what happened just now was just a small trick. The real battle and bitter battle had just begun. In a chaotic battle like this, there were very few true winners. The only difference was which side would suffer less losses. Song Bi clenched his fists tightly. His face was tense. In a battle like this, being a bystander was far less relaxing than slaughtering his way into the battle. At the very least, he didn't have to think so much when he entered the battlefield. All he had to do was to continuously kill the enemy and prevent himself from being killed. However, Yang Qindong had already set the rules for the 5-star army. In such a chaotic battle, the high-ranking officers were not allowed to participate personally. This time, Kang Ji was able to personally participate because the morale of the new Second Army had suffered a huge blow. Now that they urgently needed a leader, Commander Kang Ji rushed out. Otherwise, even he would have to stand outside the battlefield and watch everything from a bystander's point of view. The cruel battle had begun. Weapons clashed against weapons, warhorses clashed against warhorses, and humans clashed against each other. From time to time, there would be arrows falling into the battlefield. At this moment, no one could guarantee that the arrows wouldn't kill the enemy and harm the soldiers. At most, the probability of it happening would be lower. Therefore, on the battlefield, there were many cavalrymen who died in the hands of their own archers. However, this didn't stop the archers from continuing to shoot arrows. After all, even if the arrows were used as support, the number of arrows would still be higher. This was a battle where there were no winners. In a chaotic battle, individual strength played a huge role. Luck also played a huge role in winning and losing. For example, many cavalrymen who went berserk would hurt their own soldiers from time to time. In such a chaotic battle, even if you had the ability to fight against 100 people, you might not be able to escape death. Unless it was a high-ranking officer like Kang Ji, there would be dozens or even hundreds of soldiers following him wherever he went. At least they could provide some protection. War was cruel. The cavalrymen fought back and forth. From time to time, there would be people who were knocked off their warhorses. However, this didn't mean that they lost their ability to fight. On the contrary, there were more and more people who dismounted to fight. This made it so that sometimes, not only did they have to guard against being on horseback, they also had to guard against ambushes from below. Perhaps when they were swinging their swords at the enemy, the warhorse's hooves would be chopped off. Then they would lose their balance and fall off the horse. If they weren't prepared, perhaps the moment they fell off the horse, there would already be a large sword floating above their head. And it was precisely this kind of chaotic battle that lasted for nearly an hour. In the end, there was no clear winner. Finally, it was announced that the Wala cavalry had left. Worried that the 5-star army behind them would catch up, the 20,000 Wala cavalry didn't make any more moves. They only charged blindly. After charging through the new Second Army's defensive line, they left. As for those who didn't charge through, they were either killed or taken captive. 2 hours later, both sides had paid a heavy price and the battle was coming to an end. Kang Ji, who was covered in blood, whether it was his own or the enemy's, rode to Shibei. He first gave a standard military salute and then said with a smile, "Military commander, the battle is over. According to the preliminary statistics, we killed more than 4,000 enemies and captured more than 10,000 enemies. Only 5,000 of the enemy's cavalry managed to escape. We lost more than 2,000 people and 5,000 injured." After saying this, Kang Ji's left arm suddenly bled a lot. This was the mark left by the Wala cavalry's scimitar. "Haha, I wasn't paying attention and was stared at by mosquitoes." Regarding this, Kang Ji said with a look of indifference, "Good, this battle was very good. We showed the spirit of our new Second Army. Come, bandage Mr. Kang's wound. Everyone else, clean up the battlefield." Seeing that the blood was still flowing and didn't seem to have any intention of stopping, Shibi hurriedly shouted. Kang Ji went to rest, leaving behind many soldiers to clean up the battlefield. About an hour later, a large number of 5-star army cavalry came from the distance. Among them, the brothers of the 1st Cavalry Division were at the front. As the division commander, Tian who took the lead and led a group of people to the front. When he saw the mess on the battlefield, the corpses that littered the ground and the blood that dyed the plains red, he could not help but nod his head. He could feel that the new Second Army must have used all their strength in this battle. General Tian, thank you for your hard work. Shibi led a group of officers of the new Second Army to welcome him. Commander Shibi, thank you for your hard work. There must have been a lot of casualties in this battle. Tian Hu immediately saluted and then asked with a look of concern. Everyone knew that the new Second Army had just gone through an unforeseen event. Originally, the organization wasn't complete. Now that they had to fight such a fierce battle, it was already very difficult for them. Fortunately, our new Second Army isn't made of mud. We can hold on. Division Commander Kong Ji was afraid that the new Second Army would be looked down upon by others, so he took the initiative to stand up and answer. Sigh. However, Shibi waved his hand at Kong Ji and said to Tian Hu, General Tian, this is the division commander of the new Second Army's 1st Cavalry Division, Kong Ji. He is a bit straightforward. If he said anything that offended you, please don't take it to heart. The reason why he called Tian Hu general instead of division commander was that he was a major general. This was not something that an ordinary division commander could compare to. In fact, compared to his position in Bugnam of Gojoseon's heart, he was probably even lower than an ordinary division commander. Shibi was able to become the commander of the new Second Army in a way that came later not only because his ability to command the army was good, but also because his EQ was very high. This could be seen from this conversation. Oh, it's Mr. Kong. Sorry for the disrespect. Tian Hu smiled indifferently. Then he looked at Shibi and said, I, Tian Hu, am not that petty. We are all comrades, so I won't take it to heart. And I really admire the new Second Army. At least, if it were our 1st Cavalry Division, we wouldn't be able to do it no matter what. Tian Hu's words were not meant to belittle them. They were all from the bottom of his heart. Yang Chendong said that the 1st Cavalry Division was the strongest cavalry brigade. They were an existence that would rather break than bend. In their division there were only soldiers who died in battle. There were no kneeling captives. This was also their characteristic. Haha, General Tian is really praising us. We were also forced to do it. When talking about the past, there was a trace of shame on Shibi's face. No matter what, it's good to be able to persevere and hold on. How about this? We also seized 5,000 warhorses during the Battle of the First City. Now, we will give them to the new Second Army. Take it as the 1st Cavalry Division sponsorship to our brother's army. Please accept it, Commander Shibi. Tian Hu also laughed and then gave a generous gift. Chapter 1189. The 1st Cavalry Division always had 2 horses per person when they were on the road. If there were more, it would be difficult to take care of them. But how could they not pick up the horses that were abandoned on the road? And because they were at the front, they picked up some good stuff. Now that they had nowhere to put the horses, they decided to give them to the new Second Army. It could be considered a good karma, and it could also show the 1st Cavalry Division's sincerity. Hearing that there were 5,000 horses, Kong Ji's expression became much better. He finally knew that Tian Hu was not laughing at them, but was sincerely admiring them. Thank you very much, Shibi said with a touched expression. He also knew that if the other party brought too many warhorses, it would affect their speed. But no matter what, he had to remember the favor of this gift of horses. Otherwise, they could have sent a troop to send the horses back. It would definitely be a great merit. The 5,000 warhorses were quickly handed over. Considering that the Walla cavalry was already far away and that they had to chase after them, Tian Hu proposed to take his leave. She took out the limited food in the city to send the 1st Cavalry Division off. When he sent Tian Hu off, he asked tentatively, General Tian, if I ask the 6th young master to join the battle, do you think he will agree? Although the new Second Army's strength had been greatly reduced after going through a series of events, they had to fight if there was a chance to turn the situation around. Only in this way could the new Second Army's momentum be shown, and they could get rid of the humiliation of surrendering to Baiming earlier. Tian Hu naturally saw this clearly, so he did not choose to remain silent. Instead, he said after thinking for a while, those 5,000 horses can be used as entrance tickets if they are properly trained. Oh, thank you, General Tian, for reminding me. She was stunned at first, but then he understood the meaning of these words. Obviously, Tian Hu was reminding him that as long as there were enough cavalry and enough elites, they would have a chance to participate in the battle against the Walla. The 1st Cavalry Division finally left. Seeing the departing army, Division Commander Kong Ji sighed and said, I didn't expect the division commander of the world's #1 cavalry division to be so humble. He doesn't have any arrogance at all. Also, he has sincerely helped our new Second Army. You're right. General Tian is indeed a straightforward person. Perhaps his vision has long surpassed ours. In his eyes, he wants to conquer the world with the 6th young master. Only such a person is worthy of being the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division. Tian, who didn't know what Shi Bi and Kong Ji were saying about him. At this moment, he was hurrying on his way to the battlefield as he called the 5 commanders over to assign them combat missions. When we march, we must put the scouts further away. Do you remember how we were ambushed by the 6th young master? At that time, it was all thanks to the 6th young master showing mercy. Otherwise, our 1st Cavalry Division's reputation would have been tarnished. Therefore, I want to tell everyone that there's always someone better than you. Any actions or thoughts that look down on your opponents are unacceptable. If anyone dares to have such thoughts, then get out of the 1st Cavalry Division. We don't accept people who are arrogant and have no ability. When he said this, Tian, whose face was solemn and he was very serious. This was also a problem that he had just discovered. When he was in Shajing City facing the new Second Army, which had a history of repeated failures, his soldiers showed a sense of superiority. They didn't pay attention to others when they spoke, and some of them didn't even talk to others. This made the officers of the new Second Army feel very embarrassed. But from beginning to end, the commander-in-chief had never once complained to him. Just because others didn't complain didn't mean that it didn't happen. At that time, Tian, who considered that this was an internal matter of his division, so he didn't say anything. Now that he finally had the chance, he couldn't hold back and vented his anger to the 5 regimental commanders. Don't think that you're the best in the world. What did we rely on to have our current achievements? It's our comrade in arms, the 6th young master, who gave us preferential policies. Think about it. When did we not choose first when there were good soldiers? When there were good equipment, we didn't use it first. When there were good horses, we didn't choose first. Even if there were good food and drinks, we were the first to choose first? With this kind of full protection, even if we didn't do it, there would still be others who would do it, and they might even do it well. Therefore, everything that we have now has absolutely nothing to do with our own efforts. Do you understand? Regimental commanders, go back and check yourselves. When you rest during the march, you'll start criticizing and self-criticizing activities. If there's anyone who doesn't have a deep enough understanding, you'll have to help them understand. If they don't change, they'll be kicked out of our 1st Cavalry Division. Alright, there's no room for discussion on this matter. You can organize yourselves. However, I'm going to do a spot check to see which regimental commanders didn't do well. I won't find trouble with the battalion commanders, company commanders, platoon commanders, squad leaders, or soldiers. I'll only find you regimental commanders. If you don't meet the standards, I'll consider requesting the 6th young master to transfer you out of the 1st Cavalry Division after the war. His words were ruthless. Directly transferring out of the 1st Cavalry Division was tantamount to cutting off his future path of advancement and hope. The regimental commanders who originally didn't care much about it immediately became more serious. Especially the 1st Regiment Commander Taimu and the 3rd Regiment Commander Hu Bohe. They were both uncouth men who didn't care much about this kind of ideological education. Just now, they were thinking of going through the process to get away with it. But now they didn't dare to have such thoughts anymore. Everyone knew that if they were really kicked out of the 1st Cavalry Division because of this matter, they wouldn't have the face to see anyone. Even with their contributions, if they were to go to other divisions, it would be difficult for them to raise their heads. In this meeting, Tian, who was just expressing his thoughts. However, he didn't know how important this meeting was to the future development of the 1st Cavalry Division. This was equivalent to making up for their biggest shortcoming. When courage and carefulness were combined, when courage and modesty were combined, when powerful combat strength and a strong heart complemented each other, they would become the most difficult opponent to defeat. During the Ming Dynasty, Ili Beli was a part of the Chagatai Khanate of the Yuan Dynasty. Crooked Thoughts became its first king. He moved his people west to the Ili River Valley, which is the current Yining region of Xinjiang, and changed the name to Ili Beli. Ili was another transliteration of Ili, and Beli referred to Bali. In 1432 AD, Crooked Thoughts died, and his descendants fought for the throne. The country split into Ili Beli, Yarkyang, and Turfan. One of the descendants still used the name of Ili Beli, and became a subordinate country of the Ming Dynasty. Yarkyang was south of Tian Shan, east of Tsong Mountains and west of Boston Lake. The other was centered around Turfan. Ely Banli. King Bao lied. The thing he wanted to do the most in his life was to reunite Ely Banli and bring the legacy of his ancestors to greater heights. For this, he did not hesitate to lower his head to the Ming dynasty and even used Alipo to develop and strengthen himself. In history, Alipo did well, helping King Bao lied make Ely Belly strong, and he became the leader of the three. Even after he grew old, Ely Belly lasted for dozens of years before dying. However, in this life, Yang Xie's sudden rise, especially the rapid development of the five-star army, changed the original history. Especially after the battle with the five-star army, Ely Belly had lost a lot of soldiers and generals, and their strength had been greatly reduced. 80,000 of the original 230,000 troops had been eaten, and now there were only 150,000 left. Even though during this period of time, under Alipo's hard work, he had recruited 50,000 new troops, and the size of the army had reached 200,000. However, compared to before, it was not as strong as before, and it attracted the attention of Yarqiang and Turfan. This made King Bao lied sigh as he was getting further and further away from his life goal. When it rains, it pours. On this night, it was raining heavily outside the palace. Hurried footsteps could be heard coming from the depths of the palace. A bolt of lightning flashed and illuminated the figure of this person. Who else could it be but Prime Minister Ali Pu? The person who came was Alipo. He had just received the intel from the scouts, and he was urgently looking for the king to discuss matters. King Bao lied, who had already rested, was woken up by the servants. He changed into his king attire and saw Alipo in the small hall. When he saw the intel that was sent over, his brows furrowed, showing the anxiety and uneasiness in his heart. Regarding the Wara sending troops to Shur City and working with the Baiming army to deal with the five-star army, King Bao lied had known about it long ago. He had always been conflicted about this matter. As far as he was concerned, whether it was the five-star army or the Wara, they were not easy to deal with. As such, no matter who won or lost, it would not be a good thing for him. If either side expanded, they could threaten him at any time. Unless the Baiming army won, this was a powerful but unambitious country. As long as they submitted to them in name, they would be able to live freely and do what they wanted to do. Because of this, he had asked Alipo about the Baiming army's chances of winning. Alipo's answer was less than 20%. He also said that even if the Baiming army won, it would be difficult for them to expand. After all, the Great Ming Dynasty was not just the Baiming army, but there was also the Southern Ming Dynasty. Dealing with internal problems was the most important thing for them to do. This answer was not what Bao lied wanted to hear. However, since they were small and weak, even if they did not like it, they could only wait for the final victor to appear. They could only hope that no matter who won, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. This would give them more time to develop. Now the results were finally out. The five-star army had won, and the Wala army had fled towards their base in Hanoi. Chapter 1190. King Bao Lai didn't expect this. What he didn't expect was that the five-star army actually chased after them for thousands of miles without any intention of stopping. This naturally caught his attention. The Han people had a saying, "Without the lips, the teeth will feel cold." Hanoi was too close to Ely. If they really fought their way here, they would unknowingly become a threat to their borders. If that really happened, the five-star army would probably attack them. If that was really the case, they had to prepare in advance. Apu appeared here to talk about this matter. He looked at Bao Lied with a worried expression and said, "Your Majesty, the five-star army's way of doing things is quite similar to our ancestors. They really pull out their swords at the slightest disagreement. We have to be careful." Normally, the most important thing between countries was politics. When there was no way to make peace, only when things escalated to the extreme would there be war. This was also the norm when countries interacted with each other. Usually they would scold each other, but they wouldn't easily send out their troops. That would be a sign of wasting people's money and causing the economy to deteriorate. Everyone understood this principle. However, it was still broken by someone. Just like the Mongolian Empire, they didn't reason with anyone. They just attacked. Often, when countries were still waiting for diplomatic communication, the Mongolian cavalry had already killed their way into the city. This was also one of the reasons why the Mongolian Empire was able to occupy so much territory in such a short period of time. After all, many people couldn't understand the way they attacked without saying anything. In comparison, the five-star army was very similar. They also sent out their troops without saying anything. The only difference was that they had a good reason to send out their troops. Moreover, they treated the people in the occupied land very well. They also put in a lot of effort to develop the local economy. This was also why the backline was generally very stable and didn't have any major problems. However, no matter how good the 5-star army treated the people in the occupied land, it didn't mean anything to a king like Bao Lide. People like him cared more about the royal and imperial power. As long as the people were able to live, it didn't matter. With an ugly expression, Bao Lide put down the information, looked up at Alip and asked, Xianghua, do you think that if the 5-star army defeats Yeshen they will attack us? Judging from their past habits, it's very likely. Who told us to be weak? Apu didn't want to say this, but it was the truth. Their territory was small and their population was small. It was undoubtedly difficult for them to develop greatly in this limited environment. Even though he worked late into the night every day, he was still unable to completely turn the situation around. That's right, we're really too weak. If it was before the split, we would have had a chance to fight against the 5-star army. Bao Lide sighed and admitted the truth. When Bao Lide mentioned before the split, Ali's eyes lit up. He looked at Bao Lide expectantly and said, Your Majesty, you mean? That's right. It's time to contact the Yarkiang and Turfan tribes. Although we all want to eat each other, when this kind of survival is threatened, I think they will also put down their prejudices and work together like me. Bao Lide was worthy of being able to appoint a wise minister like Apu. His wisdom and boldness were few and far between. A look of admiration appeared on Arap's face as he nodded heavily. All right, allow this subject to contact them. Yes, but it must be done quickly. After all, this is a 3-way alliance. It will take a lot of time to adjust and coordinate. What we lack right now is time. Bao Lide looked at Apu solemnly as he spoke in a heavy voice. Apu nodded and asked the king about the alliance. After all, it involved too many things, so every step of the plan had to be done carefully. Otherwise, it would be fine if nothing went wrong, but if something did go wrong, it would be a big problem. The 5-star army hadn't even fought with the Wara chief, Yeshen, yet the Ili had already been on high alert. This was somewhat unexpected to Yang Qindong, and it was a major hindrance to his plan to take over this place. And no one knew about this yet. Not even the spies that Yang Xie's intelligence agency had planted in the Ili had received any information. Their intelligence agents were currently investigating the situation in Baiming's capital, especially the reaction of the Baiming Imperial Court after Shiheng's defeat. Baiming's capital. In the main hall of the Imperial Palace, a group of dancers were singing and dancing. There were dozens of tables on their left and right, and each table had an important official of the Imperial Court sitting there. They were eating delicious food, drinking wine, and enjoying the dance of the beautiful women. It was a very pleasant scene. Sitting in the main hall of the Imperial Palace, Zhu Qiu was very pleased with himself. A few days ago he had received a report from the 600 from the front line of the first city, saying that the first city was about to be taken and the 5-star army spies in the grasslands would be removed. At that time, the grasslands to the west of Baiming would become safe again. As the Emperor of Baiming, he could sit back and relax. He could then focus all his energy on the southern Ming Empire and unify it. This was undoubtedly good news for Zhu Qiu, who had been in constant trouble since he took office. In order to express his happiness, he had held a banquet in the main hall for 3 days to express his gratitude to his officials for their support. People said that horses galloped when they were flushed with success, but they did not know that flushed with success could cause horses to stumble. While Zhu Qiu was hosting a banquet for the officials, a young eunuch came to the side of the main hall with a flustered expression. He then winked at Jining, the head eunuch who was standing next to the emperor. Jining was serving the emperor, pouring wine for him. From time to time she would tell a few jokes to amuse the emperor. He suddenly noticed the young eunuch's abnormal behavior and was very angry. He had already decided that if it was not something important, he would punish this young eunuch later. This young eunuch was too blind. Taking advantage of the fact that the emperor was watching the dance and was not paying attention to her, Jining walked to the side of the hall and said to the young eunuch, "Speak, what is it? I'll tell you if it is not something important. You little monkey can wait to be beaten." The young eunuch did not care about Jin Ying's threat at all. With a nervous expression and a trembling voice, he said, "Chief eunuch, things are not good. Admiral Shiheng's army has been defeated. They have now retreated to Tulu City. This is the memorial they submitted. It was sent here at the speed of 800 miles. What? Even though Jin Ying had served several emperors and claimed to be experienced and knowledgeable, his expression changed greatly. He had not expected things to turn out like this. Didn't the memorial say that the beginning city could not hold on and was about to be taken? How could there be a turn so quickly and such a huge change at that? Jining didn't quite believe it. She took the urgent document and read it carefully, and when he saw it he almost fell to the ground. Looking at the contents, it was even worse than the young eunuch's. Jining wanted to calm down, but he found that he could not. He could only walk toward the throne room with heavy feet. At that moment, he did not know that his expression was frighteningly ugly. Cold sweat was even running down his neck. Dai Zong was so happy that he didn't notice any of this. His gaze was still on the dancers. When Jining came close to him and handed him the memorial, he casually pushed it away. "What time is this? I won't look at the memorial first. Let's talk about it later." Your Majesty, you should look at it now," Jining said with difficulty. Jining braced herself as she spoke. A eunuch actually dared to disobey the emperor's orders. That was a capital offense. But at that moment he had no other choice. He knew that if he really suppressed this memorial, it would be time to punish him. Jining had actually disobeyed an edict. This finally attracted Dai Zong's attention. He saw that the hands that were handing over the memorial were trembling. Suddenly he had a bad feeling. With a solemn expression, he reached out and took the memorial. Then he flipped through it. After about 10 breaths, he suddenly roared in anger. "Trash, a bunch of trash." The sudden rage of the emperor caused the originally peaceful main hall to fall into silence. The musicians stopped playing. The dancers were also trembling in fear. They stood in a corner of the hall, not knowing what to do. "Leave, all of you, leave." Jining took the opportunity to wave his hand at the musicians and dancers. The main hall returned to silence. Then all the officials focused their gazes on the acting emperor, Zhu Qiu, whose face was red from holding back his anger. No one knew what had happened to make the emperor so angry. "Here, let them take a look." After a pin-drop silence in the main hall, Zhu Qiu finally reacted. He took the memorial and threw it to Jining, who was standing at the side with his back hunched. "Your subject obeys." Jining agreed. Then he took the memorial and walked down the hall. He handed it to Su Yozhen, who was standing at the first position on the left. Su Yozhen reached out to take it. He opened it and read it. Then he sucked in a breath of cold air. After 2 breaths of silence, he handed the memorial to the other important officials. Shi Heng was defeated. The 5-star army won again. Not only did they solve the siege of Beginning City, but they also launched a fierce counterattack. When it rains, it pours. Even Shajing and Jingzhou City, which had previously submitted to Baiming, rebelled. They were returned to the 5-star army. This meant that the long period of planning was all for naught. So much effort and money invested had turned into ashes. It was no wonder that the emperor was so angry. Chapter 1191. A few moments later, many of the officials who had read the memorials had grave expressions. They could clearly see the severity of the situation. Many of them were even thinking, if the 5-star army used the momentum of their victory to suddenly attack Tulu City, what would they do? Would Shi Heng, who had already suffered defeat, be able to defend the city? If he couldn't defend it, once the 5-star army broke in, the Baiming army would be forced into an internal battle. This was an extremely dangerous matter. Once Baiming's capital was attacked, it would affect their own interests and safety. The officials had no choice but to take this matter seriously. Of course, there were also people like Su Yozhen who had long since submitted to Yang Qindong. He pretended to have a grave expression on his face, but he was actually very happy on the inside. For him, once the 5-star army entered the city, he would openly become a high-ranking official of the Yangxia. He might even be treated even better. You've all read it. Tell me, how should we deal with this? During this time, Zhu Qiu had already steadied her mind. When she looked at the ministers, her eyes were full of hope. Your Majesty, Tulu City is a gateway. We can't lose it. Your Majesty, Shi Heng's defeat cannot be avoided. He should be heavily punished and replaced with a new commander. Your Majesty, the 5-star army is coming with menacing momentum and cannot be resisted. There is no harm in sending someone to talk to him and see if he can be persuaded to withdraw. Your Majesty. After Zhu Qiu asked this question, there were all kinds of comments below. There were all kinds of suggestions which made people feel a little dizzy after listening to them. Zhu Qiu had no choice but to roar, "Enough! All of you shut up. We are the emperor, and Yang Qindong is just a lowly bugnom of Gojoseon. We even conferred him the title, so how can we lower our heads to him? Let's not talk about peace talks anymore. As for replacing the commander, do you have any suitable candidates in mind?" After expressing that he would not lower his head to Yang Qindong, he asked about the candidate for the new commander. At this moment, the entire hall was so silent that a pin drop could be heard. Although Shiheng was a little greedy for money and power, it had to be said that he still had some skills in war. Moreover, over the years he had already built up enough prestige in the army. How could Baiming have a backup for such a handsome man? Now that it was said that there was a change in leadership, who would be able to take on this important responsibility? After asking, there was no response for a long time. Zhu Qiu knew that it was impossible to change the commander. In this case he had to settle for the second best and said, "Everyone has read the memorial. Although Marquis Wuqinghao has the leadership responsibility this time, he is not the main reason. He is still in his position. Let's forget about the proposal of changing the commander. Now let's talk about the problem of how to defend Tulu City first. If anyone has any opinions, feel free to raise them." Zhu Qiu also knew that there were people in the imperial court who had a close relationship with Shiheng. If he showed that he wanted to change the commander or did not trust him, these words would inevitably spread out. This would have a negative effect on his control over Shiheng. This was not what he wanted to see now. Naturally, they would be punished after losing the battle. However, how to punish them and when to punish them still needed to be discussed at length. At least in the current situation, they absolutely could not be punished. Not only that, they also needed to be rewarded to stabilize the people's hearts. This was the so-called way of using people. Send troops, a large number of reinforcements. Don't we have millions of soldiers in training? Pick some of the elites and send them to Tulu City. No matter what, we have to defend it. With the high walls and thick city walls, we can fight an offensive and defensive battle like the first city. As long as the battle lasts for a long time with strong strength, the five-star army will be defeated in the end. The Minister of War Yi Ming stood up and put forward his own opinion. As the Minister of War, Yi Ming's authority was even greater than that of the previous Minister of War. This was all because Baiming took on a large number of training troops to prepare for war. Anyway, he was very comfortable and proud as the Minister of War. Yes, Minister Yi is right. I think that not only should we send troops to defend the city, but we can also find an opportunity to fight outside the city. In this way we may be able to catch the five-star army by surprise. It is not impossible to regain the initiative on the battlefield. Your Majesty, no matter what, the first city has been besieged for a long time. After such a long defensive battle, its strength should be at its weakest. We can't miss this opportunity. Grand Young Master Fu, Grand Scholar, and Minister of Justice Su Yozhen also stood up and put forward their opinions. Hearing that they would take the initiative to attack and catch the five-star army off guard, Zhu Qiu's eyes couldn't help but brighten. He looked at Su Yozhen with admiration and said, "Minister Su's words are reasonable. Minister Yi, we might as well do it. Inform Shiheng to find an opportunity to fight outside the city." Yes. Yi Ming immediately agreed. The originally celebratory court banquet thus ended. Everyone had a lot on their minds. They only hoped that Shiheng could turn the tide and allow them to continue to abuse their power in the capital. However, when one official walked out of the hall, he was extremely worried. He was the Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian. As the saying goes, before the troops and horses move, the provisions move first. Once he increased the number of troops sent to Tulu, it would involve tens of millions of money and provisions. This was his responsibility and also his source of worry. Not long ago, he gave the provisions that he had saved not long ago to General Li Tong in the Liaodong region. Although he had some now, it was beyond his ability to provide for hundreds of thousands of troops. In the face of such a large army that suddenly set out, where would he get the provisions? It was about to enter autumn. This year's provisions had not been completely conquered. If the army's expedition was delayed because of this, wouldn't he be a sinner? After leaving the imperial palace, Jin Lian gravely said, "Come on, let's not go back to the residence. Let's go straight to the Su residence." In the end, he decided to discuss this matter with Su Yozhen. Back then, it had been Su Yozhen who had suggested that he send provisions to Li Tong. Now that there was a problem, he naturally wanted to hear his opinion. Within the Su residence, Su Yozhen had only just entered when the steward came to report that the Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian, had arrived and was waiting outside. "Oh, so fast?" Su Yozhen's expression did not change as he smiled and said, "Minister Jin, please come to the main hall for a talk." Su Yozhen and Jin Lian met in the main hall, and the latter sighed. "Lord Su, you've really made me suffer this time." Su Yozhen feigned ignorance and asked, "Lord Jin, did you say this?" "Oh, Lord Su, do you still remember how you suggested that I send provisions to General Li Tong in the Liaodong region?" Jin Lian had no idea that Su Yozhen was feigning ignorance, only that he had been so busy that he had forgotten, so he reminded him. Oh, there was such a matter. At that time, General Li Tong sent someone to find my steward and gave him 20,000 taels of silver. Oh right, didn't I give Lord Jean 10,000 taels? What, is there something else? Su Yozhen purposely mentioned the 10,000 taels of silver to tell Jean Lien that he had accepted a bribe. If this matter was blown out of proportion, it would not be good for anyone. Jean Lien was stunned. He had also forgotten about the 10,000 taels of silver. Now that he thought about it, it was not that the time had not come yet. For a moment, his tone weakened. Lord Su, you're right. However, the Emperor wants to send troops to attack the 5-star army. How much provisions would that require? Our Ministry of Revenue does not have that much. You don't have any? Su Yozhen had already sent people to investigate the Ministry of Revenue's warehouse, but he still pretended to be ignorant. Yes, we don't. I'm not afraid of Lord Su's ridicule, but in the past few years, our Biming has expanded the army quickly, putting great pressure on our Ministry of Revenue. Although we have some now, it is only for daily training. Once it is used in battle, it will not be enough. When Jean Lien said this, he was about to cry. In contrast to the Minister of War Yi Ming, the other was very satisfied. His Ministry of Revenue had always been tight. If he had not intentionally saved from all sides, there would have been problems long ago. Yi Ming was a qualified official. At least he was very good at saving money. It was a pity that even the cleverest housewife could not cook without rice. He did not have any good ideas. These words were very pitiful, but in Su Yozhen's ears, he said with an indifferent expression, since it's not enough, then just report it directly. Directly report it, Lord Su is saying, report it to the Emperor? As if he had misheard, Yi Ming asked with his mouth wide open. Of course it is to report it to the Emperor. I say, Lord Yi, the food was indeed given to General Li Tong. There is nothing shameful about it. In any case, as the Minister of Revenue, you have already done your best. Our wise Emperor can understand. Su Yozhen appeared very relaxed. He wasn't trying to shirk his responsibility. Instead, it was his sincere way of dealing with the situation. After all, the amount of food they lacked was too great. Today, Zhu Qiu's intention was not to send 30 to 50,000. It was very likely that he would send 100,000 or 200,000 would be normal. With so many people, how much food would they need? Even if they could find a way to get some, it would not be a solution after a long time. Thus, reporting it was a matter of time. Since it was so, it was better to report it in the morning. This could be considered as pouring cold water on Dai Zong. It also let him know that fighting a war was not as simple as just talking. It needed money and food. If they were not willing to spend money, they would not be able to fight a war, much less win a war. Su Yozhen said twice to report the matter to the Emperor, and Yi Ming finally faced it seriously. After careful consideration, it seemed that this was the only path he could take. Although it was inevitable that he would be reprimanded if he reported it like this, and he might even be punished, he was not an immortal. He could not conjure food, so he could only do this. Well, Lord Su, I will report to the Emperor tomorrow, but I will have to trouble Lord Su to help me beat the drum. Now, who doesn't know that the Emperor relies on Lord Su very much? This time you have to save me. Well said, well said. Tomorrow I will meet the Emperor with Lord Yi. It just so happens that I have something to report to the Emperor. Su Yozhen nodded. He urgently needed to complete the task handed over by Yang Qindong, so he had to get the first-hand information. If he could go with Yi Ming, he would owe him a favor and get the information. Wouldn't it be the best of both worlds? Chapter 1192. Most importantly, he could also take the opportunity to persuade Dai Zong to be cautious. Yang Qindong said that they only needed to wait for 2 more months and the safety of the beginning city would be impregnable. At that time, even if Biming sent out an army, they would not be afraid. Although he did not know why all of this was done, since Yang Qindong said it, Su Yozhen could only choose to believe it. Furthermore, he only needed to delay the Northern Ming dynasty for 2 months. This was not a difficult task. With Su Yozhen's guarantee, Yi Ming left with satisfaction. However, what was unexpected was that the next morning, Yi Ming went directly to the entrance of Su Mansion and acted as if he wanted to accompany Su Yozhen to the court. It was obvious that he was afraid that Su Yozhen would find an excuse to run away. Lord Yi, you don't believe me? After leaving the mansion and seeing Yi Ming's sedan, Su Yozhen knocked on the other party with an unhappy expression. I'm sorry. I need Lord Su's help. Please forgive me. However, Lord Su, don't worry. After today, I will definitely apologize to Lord Su. You see, Yi Ming showed a pitiful look and looked at Su Yozhen with a sad gaze. Then let's go. Su Yozhen pretended to be in a difficult position and said. However, when he returned to the sedan, his face was not ugly at all. Not only that, but he was also a little excited. Being able to build a good relationship with Yi Ming would only be of great help to him in understanding Bai Ming's economic strength. This time the other party owed him a favor. In the future, when he inquired about some things, it would be easier for him to get information. The two ministers of the imperial court entered the palace together and participated in the court meeting. After the meeting, the two of them went to the back hall to meet Zhu Qiu. In the back hall, when Yi Ming and Su Yozhen had just knelt down, Zhu Qiu took the lead to speak. Minister Yi, you have to hurry up and prepare the amount of money for the army mobilization. Before the army is mobilized, the provisions have to be prepared first. Your responsibility is great. Your Majesty. I'm guilty. Yi Ming's face was full of sadness. If one looked carefully, one would see that his eyes were a little red. At this moment, Yi Ming's appearance definitely had the potential to become a movie star. You're guilty? What crime is there? Zhu Qiu looked at Yi Ming, who was still kneeling on the ground, and had a bad feeling. Your Majesty, it's like this. The grain reserves of our Ministry of Revenue are not enough to support a large-scale war. Now we... Without waiting for Yi Ming to finish speaking, Zhu Qiu, who was sitting on the dragon throne, almost jumped up. What did you say? There was no more food? Where did they go? Wasn't last year's harvest pretty good? I remember that the price of food is not high. Don't you know how to collect more? They were about to send out their troops, and now Yi Ming was telling them that they didn't have any provisions. Wasn't this just tearing down their stage? How could he not be angry? How could he not be angry? Seeing that the emperor was indeed infuriated by the dragon debate, the kneeling Yi Ming hurriedly explained, Yes, your Majesty is right. Last year's harvest was good, and the price of grain wasn't high, but we weren't the only one collecting grain. Many big clans and merchants were also collecting grain. Their prices were even a little higher than the government, so most of the grain was taken away by them. The common people often said that it was hard for the people in bad years, but it was even harder for the people in good years. This was referring to the problem of grain prices. When the harvest was bad, grain production was low and grain prices were high. Other than handing over their grain, the common people had nothing left. Because there was no grain to sell, they couldn't make any profit. On the other hand, when the harvest was good, grain prices were especially low, and they couldn't make much money. They could only scrape together enough to eat. This was the common people's sorrow. Compared to those big families, they were different. When the price of food was low, they would buy in large quantities and hoard them. Then, when the price of food was high, they would sell it in exchange for a large amount of money. It was difficult to say that they would suffer a loss. Over time, they relied on this kind of business to make money, and their hearts became wild. It developed to the point where they fought with the government to buy grain. The same grain, different prices. Farmers would definitely be willing to sell to the side with a higher price. This also caused Yi Ming to not be able to buy much grain. Taken away? Taken away. Zhu Qiu had already stood up angrily from the dragon throne. Then he kept pacing back and forth to show the anger in his heart. As the emperor, he was actually aware of the grain problem. He was even aware of who was stirring up trouble and reselling the grain. However, the influence of these people wasn't small. Once they joined forces, it would involve many aspects, to the point that he couldn't help but be afraid. This was also the reason why he couldn't do anything even though he knew that someone was collecting grain. Is it possible to buy some grain from those people at a fair price? After pacing back and forth a few times, Zhu Qiu suddenly turned around and asked the kneeling Yi Ming. Your Majesty. With a bitter expression, Yi Ming said, It's impossible to buy grain at a fair price. Adding some money shouldn't be a problem. After all, they are Bai Ming's subjects. They should also contribute to Bai Ming. And then how much money do you need to add? Hearing that there was a way, Zhu Qiu's face revealed a trace of expectation. Yi Ming didn't immediately answer. Instead, he calculated in his heart. Then he raised his head and stretched out a hand. 10%. When Zhu Qiu saw that it was only one hand, his expression became much more relaxed. No, it's 50%. Yi Ming opened up his hand as he spoke. At this moment there were 5 hands. What? They are profiting from the country's crisis. They are forcing me. When he heard that it was 50%, Zhu Qiu immediately became unhappy. As a result, the original 30,000 jin of grain could only buy 20,000 jin. This price difference was too high. Zhu Qiu cursed these profiteers and rich families in his heart. However, he didn't have any better methods to deal with them. Who asked these people to exist to represent the interests of too many people? Once he lost the support of these people, it would be hard to say if his throne would be stable. Unable to make an example out of these people, Zhu Qiu could only lower his tone and ask, "Is there any other method?" No. His head shook like a rattled drum. Yi Ming continuously shook his head. If he really had a better method, he wouldn't have come here to be scolded. If there isn't, then what are you doing as the Minister of Revenue? Finally, the thunderous anger that Yi Ming imagined appeared. At this moment, he lowered his head and gave a look to Su Yozhen, who came with him. This was the time to see the use of an alliance. Su Yozhen had been waiting for an opportunity. If he didn't let Zhu Qiu understand some things, it would be hard to say what he wanted to say. Seeing that the time had come, if it was any later, Yi Ming might be punished. If another Minister of Revenue came up, it might not be beneficial to his work. He finally slowly raised his head, holding the ceremonial tablet in his hand, and said, "Emperor, please calm down. This subject has a way to solve the food problem." Zhu Qiu, who was really angry, even wanted to punish Yi Ming. Su Yozhen's words instantly extinguished a lot of his anger. "Beloved Minister Su, you said you have a method?" "That's right. Although this subject's method can't solve the problem immediately, we only need to wait for a month or so. When this year's rations arrive, the problem will be solved." Su Yozhen raised her head and spoke with a righteous expression. "Wait for more than a month?" Zhu Qiu repeated after hearing that. "Yes, it's only a month. It won't delay the army's departure. Saving this time can save us a lot of money. No matter how you look at it, it's a profit. When the time comes, we can use the same price to compete with them. I believe the people will support the government more. Speaking of money, this subject has an idea that I want to report to the emperor." Using money to talk about the matter, Su Yozhen talked about the other topic that he had come for today. When the matter of money was brought up, Zhu Qiu clearly became nervous. The longer he had been the emperor, the more he knew the benefits of money. Without money, it really was hard to move forward. He even thought that if he didn't have money, would people still listen to him? "Beloved Minister Su, we are listening." "Yes, Your Majesty. Since this subject has taken charge of the Ministry of Justice, I found that there are often insufficient prison cells. This is because there are too many people who don't follow self-discipline. Of course, there are also some people who make mistakes in the heat of the moment. They have said more than once that they want to repent, but they don't have the chance. Because of this, many people have come to this subject. There are even some people who want to use money to redeem themselves. This way we can give those who have always been good a chance to repent. At the same time, we can alleviate the problem of insufficient prison cells. This subject has thought about it again and again. This subject doesn't have the authority to make such a big decision, so this subject asks for Your Majesty's instructions. Use money to redeem people? Won't that cause problems? Zhu Qiu quickly grasped the crux of the matter. It won't. Not all crimes can be redeemed with money. Only when the crime isn't serious and the person has the intention to turn over a new leaf will it be allowed. As for the specific details, our Ministry of Justice will send people to carefully verify them. That's right, there was a child surnamed Qin who had always been good. When he was preparing to take the exam to become a county official, he drank too much and unintentionally injured someone. It was only a minor injury. Our local constable arrived soon after. In the end, he was sentenced to 3 months in prison. Speaking of which, the crime wasn't serious and the time he spent in prison wasn't very long. However, the problem was that it would delay his chances of passing the exam and even affect his future. The Qin family came to me because of this matter. They were willing to compensate the person who was beaten and also wanted to redeem him. Oh, they were prepared to pay 5,000 taels of silver to redeem him? Chapter 1193. So much silver, but it's just a light injury? Zhu Qiu listened carefully. When he heard that such a small matter could bring 5,000 taels of silver into the national treasury, his eyes widened with a look of disbelief. Yes, this is the price that they offered. This subject has thought about it. Since this matter concerns a person's future, and the Qin family is a respectable family, a mere 5,000 taels is not enough. No matter what, it has to be doubled. We have to ask for 10,000 taels. Su Yozhen's tone was normal, but the result of her words shocked Zhu Qiu. It was just injuring someone and being punished with 3 months of imprisonment. If they let the person go, they could get 10,000 taels. This deal was too easy to make. If everything was like this, then he would Baiming how many children with the surname Qin. How much money could their national treasury earn in a year? This was a great plan to make a fortune. With money they could do many things. When the time came, would they have to worry about not being able to destroy their opponents? The excited Zhu Qiu once again paced back and forth in the Dragon Palace. After pacing back and forth several times, he finally made up his mind and said, "All right, Jin understands the matter. The specifics will be handled by beloved official Su, but those who have committed heinous crimes cannot be released. Also, Jin will not mention this matter to anyone else, nor will Jin agree. Do you understand?" Zhu Qiu wanted to be a whore, but he also wanted to establish a chastity. If nothing happened he could earn enough money. Something big happened he could push off the blame. Su Yozhen originally did not expect the emperor to issue a decree. If it really was done, wouldn't the rich be able to do whatever they wanted? He only needed the emperor to know about this matter. The specifics would naturally be handled by him. As for whether or not this matter would attract the opposition of the other officials, he was not afraid. Not to mention that he had countless methods to force the opposing officials to shut their mouths. He also had Yang Qindong as an escape route. He did this in order to disrupt the social order of Baiming. If he could not stay here, Bugnam of Gojoseon would definitely ensure his safety. Yi Ming, who should have been beaten with a board, was not punished because of Su Yozhen. In the end, they agreed to postpone the departure of the army for more than a month. They would set out to the grasslands after the autumn harvest. The two ministers walked out of the palace together. Along the way, Yi Ming expressed his gratitude many times. "Su Darren, His Majesty's fondness for you is truly envious of others." After a round of thanks, Yi Ming spoke of his thoughts on today's matter. "Yi Darren is overpraising me. All this is just what a subject should do." Su Yozhen chuckled. Today's meeting with the saint was like killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Not only did he delay Baiming's deployment of troops, but he also owed Yi Ming a favor. At the same time he also planted the seeds of chaos in Baiming's social order. This time he had made a great contribution in front of Yang Qindong. Ai, if all the officials were like Lord Su, then who would be a match for our Baiming? It's just that there's one thing this lowly official doesn't understand. Yi Ming was a primary second-rank official. Su Yozhen was a secondary first-rank official. It wasn't wrong to use the word lowly official. This was enough to prove Yi Ming's admiration for Su Yozhen at this moment. "Yi Darren, please don't say that. If there's anything we can discuss it with each other." Su Yozhen naturally wouldn't be arrogant and returned with a smile. "All right, then this lowly official will speak presumptuously. Just now, Su Darren said that depending on the situation those people can be ransomed. I wonder what the standard is." Yi Ming finally asked what he wanted to ask. In his opinion there was no standard at all. If there had to be one, it would all depend on Su Yozhen's words. If Su Yozhen thought that it could be redeemed, then it was the same as committing the crime of murder. On the other hand, if he thought that it couldn't be done, then you had to hold on even if you were wrongly accused. In this way, how much power would this be? How many high-ranking officials and nobles would be able to make friends with this matter? Over time, once enough of a net was formed, it would be difficult for the emperor to move against Su Yozhen in the future. There would be many constraints and difficulties. "Oh, this matter, there are no regulations now, but there will definitely be in the future. Well, if Yi Darren has any friends who need help, just ask." Su Yozhen knew that Yi Ming saw through the trick in this matter, but he was not afraid. Everyone was good. He wouldn't deliberately target anyone. On the contrary, he was very willing to do some favors. Yi Ming wanted this sentence. After all, Su Yozhen was the Minister of Justice. He was the boss of this matter. He couldn't intervene even if he wanted to. Being able to get this promise, once there was a friend who needed help in the future, he would also have some confidence. "Haha, thank you, Su Darren." Yi Ming clasped his fist and laughed. Well said, haha." Su Yozhen also clasped his fist and laughed. The Baiming army delayed the time to re-enter the grassland because of the grain and fodder. When the news appeared in front of Yang Qindong in the form of a telegram, he also breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Very good. The new grain will only be harvested after more than a month. At that time, it will take more than 3 months to collect grain by grain and mobilize the army. There is no need to worry about the beginning city." The alliance between the Baiming army and the Wala army had indeed brought a lot of trouble to Yang Qindong. At one point, it even almost caused the new First Army and the new Second Army to be completely wiped out. Even now, thinking back on the dangers involved, it was still so frightening. If the matter of the Shaowei province had not been resolved quickly enough, he was afraid that he would not have been able to save the beginning city in time. Now, Yang Qindong's strength was expanding rapidly, especially after he took over the small Wu province, which gave him more foundation. More than 500,000 of the original Wu soldiers were captured and surrendered, which gave him more confidence in doing things. Yang Qindong's strength was expanding rapidly, especially after he took over the small Wu province, which gave him more confidence in doing things. Send a telegram to the small Japanese empire and ask them to speed up the reorganization of the army. The first echelon, 50,000 people, will set off in half a month at the latest and enter the Liaodong region. They will appear in front of the beginning city in 2.5 months at the latest. Send a telegram to Chichen City and ask Castellan Yuqian to prepare more food and supplies to the Shaowei province by sea. Half a month later, they will follow the army to the Liaodong region. Send a telegram to the person in charge of the security bureau in the capital of Baiming. Commend Su Yozhen for his recent work. At the same time, take out 1 million taels of silver as a fund for activities. At the same time, pay attention to the safety of my family, the Hu family and other close people of this king. A series of orders came from Yang Qindong's mouth. Only then did Yang Qindong walk out of the military tent energetically. Outside the military tent, there was smoke rising from the kitchen. It was obviously time for lunch. Pass down the order. After lunch, the troops will speed up and arrive at Shajing City as soon as possible. At the same time, inform the 4th Army Division at the back to speed up their march. Yang Qindong could not wait any longer. He had to launch a sudden attack while the Walla cavalry's morale was low. Otherwise, if he did not remove the roots of the weeds, they would grow again when the spring breeze came. Once Yes Hen escaped, it would be difficult to find him in the vast grassland. This was the reason why he only brought these troops to Hanoi. He was afraid that if he brought too many troops, Yes Hen would escape without a fight. He was especially afraid that he would escape to the north. In that case he would really be letting the tiger return to the mountain. Hanoi region, disorderly well city. Those who had fled back were the first to enter the city with their cavalry in a somewhat sorry state. When they left the city they were so arrogant, leading 150,000 elite cavalrymen. But when they returned, there were less than 30,000 cavalrymen. Moreover, they had lost their food. Anyone with eyes could see the result of this battle. As one of the 4 most important generals under Xianxian, and the only remaining one, Bo Mu led his cavalry out of the city gates to welcome Xianxian. When he saw Xianxian's dusty appearance, he immediately rode up and asked with concern, "Leader Yu, if there's anything we'll talk about it when we get back." Noticing that there were many people looking at him at the city gate, Yes Hen shook his head gently and gave Bo Mu a look. The army smoothly entered the city and soon came to the general's mansion. When there was no one else, Yes Hen took off his armor and said something that surprised Bo Mu. "This time we lost. The 5-star army has been chasing us. For safety's sake we must leave here." "Leave here? But," Bo Mu said with a puzzled expression. The reason why the Vala tribe was able to maintain their current strength, especially after the appearance of the 5-star army and the destruction of the Tatar's main forces, was because they were able to maintain their strength. Even after the surrender of countless Mongol tribes, they were still able to grow and expand. The most fundamental reason was that they were able to occupy a city. In the past, the Mongolian cavalry was used to moving around and attacking in a wandering manner. Usually they were herders, but once they found a target, they would transform into fierce grassland wolves, burning, killing, robbing and plundering. There was no evil that they would not do. This was their nature and also the environment. The advantage was that they did not have a fixed residence. Even if they had enemies who wanted to take revenge, it would be difficult to find them. The disadvantage was that it was difficult for them to develop and grow. Because they did not have a fixed location, they relied on plundering to make a living, and there was no opportunity to develop. In view of these problems, Yes Hen made a bold decision, and that was to change from wandering to fixed. He sent troops to occupy the cities of the Great Ming Dynasty, and learned from the Great Ming Dynasty's yamen to manage the cities. He allowed outsiders to do business and farm here, and they only charged a certain amount of money. Needless to say, this way they really did develop. Slowly, with money they could recruit soldiers and buy everything they needed. Gradually, Wara people were no longer a nomadic people, and they were evolving into the Han people. If they continued to develop like this, it was inevitable that they would become stronger and stronger. Once the time was right, it was not impossible to overthrow the old regime and establish a new empire. But now, Yes Hen wanted to change his previous decision and return to a nomadic life. It It was no wonder that Beaumur was so surprised and confused. Chapter 1194. He knew very well what Yes-Hen was worried about, so he didn't object immediately. Instead he asked tentatively, "Leader, is the 5-star army really that powerful? Can they attack Chaosjing City? We have recently strengthened the city's defenses." Yeshen's eyes flashed with fear. He shook his head and said, "You haven't fought with the 5-star army before, so you don't know how powerful they are. Whether it is weapons, equipment, personnel quality, or even riding ability, they are not inferior to us. They can even be said to be stronger than us. Under their powerful guns and cannons, no city can say that it is strong. We will definitely lose if we fight against them." Guns and cannons? Beaumur shook his head in disbelief. Those things are not omnipotent. As far as I know, the Baiming army also used a lot of cannons when they attacked the beginning city, but the effect seems to be different. When he said these words, Beaumur's heart was filled with contempt. In his opinion, the leader must be afraid of the 5-star army. That's why he was so nervous and careful. That's different. Thinking of the red coat cannons used by the Baiming army, Yes-Hen shook his head and said, "Cannons are also divided into different levels. Baiming's cannons are no different from a fire stick in front of them. Okay, this matter is settled. We have to leave here as soon as possible. Take as much as you can and burn the things you can't." Thinking of the power of the 5-star army, especially the power of those cannons, Yes-Hen felt very nervous. He just wanted to leave here as soon as possible. As long as he entered the North Desert, he would be able to fly freely. With the strength of the 5-star army, it would be difficult to find him in that kind of environment. Yes-Hen was the leader, which was equivalent to the identity of an emperor. He said so with certainty. Even if Beaumur had different opinions, he had to obey. Knowing that there was no room for change, he reluctantly said, "Okay, leader, I will go and prepare. However, there are a lot of things that need to be taken away. I'm afraid it will take a few days." "Hold on tight, Beaumur. You have to remember that as long as we are still alive, everything that we have lost can be taken back. But if we are all gone, then we really have nothing left." Yes-Hen said some philosophical words with emotion. From this sentence alone, it could be seen that Yes-Hen was someone with a tactical mind and could even see the big picture. What he said was somewhat similar to what the later generation said about the existence of people and the loss of people, and the existence of both people and land. Yes-Hen had such a view of the overall situation, but the people below might not see it the same way. When they were used to having a fixed home, it was easy to imagine how much resistance there would be when they were asked to wander. As a result, even though the order was given, everyone's efficiency was extremely slow. Previously, Beaumur had said that it would take a few days, but 10 days had passed and they were still not ready. This made Yes-Hen feel more and more danger. He had no choice but to give the order that they had to set off in 5 days. If there were still things that were not properly prepared or loaded into the car, then he would directly destroy them. It was a town that did not occupy a large area. But because of its geographical location, it had become a place that military strategists would fight for. West past South Minghami Guard, south of it was the Ili border state, south of it was the Dahatao region such as Hanoi and disordered Well City, east of it was a prairie, over the Lang Mountain and other places were Shajing City and Jingzhou City. North of it was still a boundless prairie, and about a few hundred miles later, it was a desert, an uninhabited area that could also be called a safe zone and a war-free zone. Such an important place was once the focus of the Great Ming Dynasty's defense, and it also became a bridgehead to prevent the tribes of the prairie from entering the Great Ming Dynasty. The emperors of the Great Ming Dynasty had also arranged a large number of troops here. And all these changes began when the Great Ming Dynasty divided the north and south. According to the geographical division, this place should belong to Baiming, but because it was too far away from the Great Ming Dynasty, it was eventually abandoned and now became one of the territories of the Wara cavalry. When the Wala cavalry faced the 5-star army, it was always difficult for them to gain any advantage, but in the eyes of other forces, it was already a very powerful existence. Since Yes-Hen sent people to occupy this place, no one dared to have any ideas about it, and no one wanted to bear the revenge of the Wala cavalry. But this did not include the 5-star army. Just like now, the Liaodong Cavalry Reinforced Regiment was quietly approaching here. In a low sand dune 10 miles east of Yiji, the regiment commander Tong Long and the deputy regiment commander Zhao Xing were looking down at a simple sand table in front of them, making arrangements and preparations before the battle. "Regiment commander, Our scouts have reported that there are now 3,000 Walla cavalry in Iji, and 500 desperados recruited from all over the country, respectively guarding the 4 entrances to the town. There are barricades on the outside and ropes on the inside. It will not be easy for any force to force their way in. The deputy regiment commander Zhao Xing said as he pointed at the sand table in front of him, pointing out the distribution of the Walla cavalry. Hiss. Hearing the analysis, Tong Long could not help but take a deep breath. He thought that Bugnam of Gojoseon ordered him to take down Iji, and this was a simple matter, but he did not expect that there would be so many difficulties. His Liaodong cavalry reinforced regiment only had 5,000 cavalry, and they were the attacking side. If they were not careful, not only would they be heavily injured, but if they could not take down this important town, it would delay Bugnam of Gojoseon's plan. After Zhao Xing finished the report, he also frowned. Obviously he did not know what to do. After all, the enemy's forces were on par with theirs and they came from afar, so they were not very familiar with the environment. There would be no good result if they forced their way in. But what if they used their wits? It seemed that they could not think of a better way in a short time, and it was likely that it would be extremely difficult to get close to the enemy. Whether it was Tong Long or Zhao Xing, they were both surrendered generals. This caused them to be at a disadvantage compared to others when they first started. Only Yang Qindong was generous and did not doubt the people he used. After discovering the bravery and intelligence of the two, he was assured to hand over the entire reinforced regiment to them. It was because of this that they felt even more pressure. Under pressure there was unlimited motivation. Tong Long and Zhao Xing had thought that they would perform well on the battlefield to prove their abilities, and also to prove that Bugnam of Gojoseon was not wrong. But now there was finally a mission that they could complete alone, and now they were helpless. How could they not be anxious? Why don't we just force our way in? I will lead the troops to rush in first and Deputy Regiment Commander Zhao will be at the back. This time, even if we lose all of our reinforced regiment, we must take down Iji. Bugnam of Gojoseon's orders must be completed. Tong Long, who had run out of ideas, became a little anxious. He simply smashed his fist heavily on the sand table, putting on a desperate stance. You can't, Regiment Commander. Zhao Xing quickly shook his head and said, we are not afraid of death, but if we die without completing the mission, then we will become the sinners of the 5-star army, and our families and friends will be implicated, and we will be looked down upon forever. Then what should we do? What do you think? Tong Long's eyes were spitting fire when he heard that they could not force their way in. Think about it, think about it. Of course, Zhao Xing did not have a good idea, but he knew that it was impossible to force their way in, and this could very well ruin Bugnam of Gojoseon's grand plan. In that case, even if the entire Liaodong cavalry reinforced regiment was sacrificed, they would still not get any credit, and would instead become sinners. Report. Just as the two regimental commanders were arguing and feeling helpless, a bodyguard jogged over. He first saluted Tong Long and Zhao Xing, then said, there are 2 Han men outside the camp. They say they want to see Regimental Commander Tong and Deputy Regimental Commander Zhao. What is there to report about Han people? I don't want to see them. Tong Long waved his hand in anger. On the other hand, Zhao Xing's eyes narrowed. Wait, what did you say? They said they want to see Regiment Commander Tong and Deputy Regiment Commander Zhao? Yes, that's what they said. The soldier nodded, indicating that there was no mistake. That's strange, how do they know our names? Zhao Xing said with a face full of confusion. At this moment, Tong Long finally understood what was going on. Could this be the enemy's spy? They've already discovered us, right? It's hard to say. We'll know once we see them, Regiment Commander, you see. Zhao Xing had a feeling that the other party was a friend and not an enemy, otherwise they would not have reported, and would have brought soldiers to attack them. Then let's see them. How about this, you go invite them in. Also, inform the other soldiers to prepare for battle. Tong Long nodded. No matter who the other party was, he had to make the necessary preparations. After receiving the regiment commander's order, the soldier turned and left, following which more than 10 executioners lay in ambush on the left and right sides of the temporary tent, ready to rush out and kill at the slightest sign of trouble. After a while, the soldier brought 2 men dressed in Han Chinese clothing, dressed like Jianghu people, into the temporary tent. From afar, the 2 of them were muscular, giving off the feeling that their bodies were filled with explosive power. Following behind the soldier, the 2 of them looked left and right, as if they were very curious about everything. When they entered the tent, the leader paused for a moment, his face revealing an unfathomable smile. Including the soldier, the 5 of them stood in the temporary tent. Both parties did not speak immediately, instead sizing each other up. In the end, it was Deputy Regiment Commander Zhao Xing who spoke first. 2 strong men, who are you? Hehe, you're quite alert, there are even executioners outside. King Kong, we have to be careful not to get killed. The leader did not answer immediately, instead he spoke to his brother behind him as if there was no one around. Chapter 1195. Tiger King, they're just trying to scare us, right? I'm a coward, what should we do? The man called King Kong spoke, but he didn't look like he was really afraid. The duo's exchange of questions and answers showed that they did not place Tong Long and Zhao Xing in their eyes at all. This caused the former to become displeased as he suddenly raised his voice and said, "The 2 of you, this is not your home. If you have something to say, just say it. If you continue to cause trouble, I will have no choice but to treat you as enemies and take you down first." Oh, look, you're still anxious. Ha ha ha, King Kong, show us your identity. Tiger King laughed, obviously amused by Tong Long's behavior. Although he said that, his right hand shook and a green military certificate was taken out just like that. Military certificate? Seeing this green certificate, Tong Long and Zhao Xing were shocked. They also had the same certificate, which was proof of their identity. After confirming that the people who came were indeed on their side, the 2 of them relaxed a lot. Then they reached out and took Tiger King's and King Kong's certificates. But when they opened it, the 2 of them were stunned and looked at the 2 people in front of them in disbelief. Tong Long and Zhao Xing's shocked expressions were not out of Tiger King and King Kong's expectations. Then Tiger King said, "What? Don't you know how to salute when you see your superior?" This question woke the 2 of them up from a dream. The 2 of them quickly put their feet together, stood at attention and said in unison, "Hello, sir." The 2 of them were the captain of the Wolf Fang Special Forces, Tiger King, and the captain of the division, King Kong. The Tiger King, also known as the Iron Tiger, didn't need to be mentioned. Although he didn't have many soldiers with him, only a few hundred, he was experienced and powerful. The missions he completed were also irreplaceable. His military rank had long since been promoted to the rank of senior colonel. Even King Kong, who was the captain of the division, was also a colonel. In comparison, the commander of the newly established Liaodong Cavalry Regiment, Tong Long, was only a lieutenant colonel, and Zhao Xing, the deputy commander, was only a major. When the lieutenant colonel and major saw the colonel and the colonel, of course they had to salute to show their respect. The 2 men saluted, and Iron Tiger and King Kong returned the salute. Then the 4 men clasped their hands together. Tong Long said excitedly, "I've long heard from Commander Bai Shuang that there's an extremely mysterious Wolf Fang Special Forces in the 5-star Army. You've completed a mission that even thousands of soldiers and horses would find difficult to complete. It's really admirable. I didn't expect to finally meet you now." "That's right. We've admired you for a long time. I didn't expect to meet you here. It's just that you're here for." Although Deputy Commander Zhao Xing had some guesses in his heart, he still couldn't be sure before he received a concrete answer. Tai Hu laughed heartily and said, "We are here on the orders of the 6th young master to help you capture Yiji. How is it? Do you have any leads?" "That's great." Hearing that they were here to help him, Tong Long was naturally overjoyed. If he still needed the help of others for a mission, he wouldn't be in a good mood. However, Yiji was a place that was easy to defend and hard to attack. It couldn't be better if someone came to help him. "Yes, thank you Wolf Fang Special Forces for coming to help. To be honest, the commander and I were still worried about the mission. We really couldn't think of any better ideas," Zhao Xing said excitedly. He seemed to have seen the hope of capturing Yiji. The 2 men were so honest that Tai Hu had a good impression of them. He laughed and said, "To be honest, when we received the orders from the 6th young master to help you capture Yiji, we didn't really understand it. It's just 1 soldier and a few more important towns. You have 5,000 cavalrymen. It shouldn't be a problem to complete the mission. However, when we really understood it, we realized that this mission is indeed not easy to complete." Even Tai Hu said that the mission was not easy to complete. Tong Long and Zhao Xing were both shocked and said, "What? Even with the strength of the Wolf Fang Special Forces, they can't complete it?" "Haha, our Wolf Fang Special Forces is also made up of people. There are also many missions that we can't complete," Tai Hu said honestly. For example, they couldn't enter the palace of the great Ming Dynasty to kill the emperor. There were many palace guards there and they were quite strong. If they couldn't complete the mission in a short time, they would be in danger of being surrounded and swallowed. Tai Hu actually admitted it. This made Tong Long and Zhao Xing's faces turn ugly. If even the Wolf Fang Special Forces couldn't do it, then how could they deal with this mission? Without waiting for the two to say anything, Tai Hu laughed and said, "There are some missions that our Wolf Fang Special Forces can't complete, but it doesn't include the mission in front of us. It's just a small town. There are more people than us." Oh. Hearing this sudden turn of events, Tong Long and Zhao Xing's expressions changed. "So you're saying that you can take this place? There's no problem at all. We have already investigated. The one guarding Yiji is a general of the Great Ming Dynasty. His name is He Wei. His specialty is that he is good at fighting defensive battles. After he was captured by Yes Hen, he surrendered because he was afraid of death. As long as we capture this person, all the problems will be solved." When Tai Hu said this, there was a bit of anger in his eyes. As a general of the Great Ming Dynasty, he actually surrendered to another race because he was afraid of death. Such a person, in Yang Qindong's words, was a traitor. And to deal with a traitor, no matter how excessive the method, it was nothing. Therefore it was fine if this He Wei cooperated. If he didn't cooperate, then he didn't mind letting him suffer a fate worse than death. Both Tong Long and Zhao Xing understood the method that Tai Hu proposed. The two immediately asked, "Are we going to capture the leader first? It's just that it's a bit difficult to achieve." "This is nothing. This is one of the subjects that we often train in. Plus, the other party doesn't know that we are here, so the chance of success is 90%. At this time, King Kong, who hadn't spoken much, spoke. 90%? Then 10% is? When he heard that it wasn't 100% certain, Tong Long asked with concern. According to the sixth young master, there is no mission that can be 100% successful before the mission is carried out. Therefore we only said 90%, but it's no different from 100%. Tai Hu explained with a smile, which was equivalent to giving the other two people confidence. "So that's the reason." Tong Long and Zhao Xing chuckled, then asked, "Then when will the mission be carried out? What do we need to do?" "The sixth young master is urging us to take action tonight. We need the cooperation of the two commanders. When the time comes, it'll be like this." In the following time, as the person with the highest military rank, Tai Hu became the overall commander and came up with a military plan to capture Yes Hen. He Wei. He wasn't very tall and he was even a little chubby. He had a round face, a big mouth, and his eyes were sometimes cloudy and sometimes clear. He gave people a feeling that they couldn't see through him. Speaking of which, he was very capable, especially when he came up with a series of defensive tactics. He once made the grassland cavalry, who wanted to come to the Great Ming Dynasty to harvest grain, suffer a lot. Later on, the Great Ming Dynasty was divided into two. For example, the army guarding the border didn't have any logistical support for a long time. Under Yeshin's heavy siege, they finally surrendered because they had no food. As the general guarding the city, He Wei was naturally taken care of. At first, Yes Hen tried to reason with him and wanted to be used by him. Unfortunately, he didn't move him even when he offered him a high position, a generous salary, and even money and beautiful women. Later on, he wanted to kill him out of anger. However, he didn't expect that he would find his weakness. He was extremely afraid of death. Since He Wei didn't die, he naturally became the general that Yes Hen chose. He was given the mission of guarding the important town Yes Hen. After accepting the mission, He Wei made full use of his strength. Although he didn't have many troops, he was able to defend Yiji like it was an impregnable fortress. In his words, it would be impossible for anyone to take down this place without an army of 30 to 50,000. If such an army really appeared in the vicinity, he would have received the news long ago. At that time, whether it was asking for help from Yexin or Turpan in the west, they wouldn't ignore it. After all, taking down this place was equivalent to opening up a path to the other two places. Even if it was for their own sake, they had to take action. With these things to rely on, He Wei's heart could finally be at ease. However, after the previous experience of being captured, he stayed in his home in the town almost every day. When he needed to go out, he would be accompanied by at least 20 bodyguards to protect his safety. Yes Hen knew about this. He also knew that He Wei was a capable person, so he specially strengthened the level of protection. Because of his confidence in He Wei, this was also the reason why Yes Hen didn't immediately escape to the desert in the north after he was defeated in the origin city. Instead, he went to Chaotic Well City first. There was still a way out, so he didn't need to panic. He took the opportunity to bring more people and supplies out, which would be more beneficial to his future development. However, Yes Hen didn't know that in order to cut off Yeshin's escape route, Yang Qindong actually sent out the most elite Wolf Fang Special Forces. This was a problem that had to be solved. If Yes-hen knew about it, he wouldn't have wasted so much time in chaotic Well City. After the sun hung high for a day, it finally set when night came, and the moon hung high in the sky, overlooking the earth. Dong dong dong. The town guard beat the drum 3 times and shouted, "The weather is dry, be careful of candles." The sound echoed in the quiet city that had already fallen asleep, like a piece of music that lulled people to sleep. Just as the 2 guards walked through a street and turned to another street, 6 black shadows quietly appeared behind them. Chapter 1196. They were dressed in black, and even their faces were smeared with black ink, making them look completely black. They hid in the corner of the street. Even if someone walked past them, it would be difficult for them to be discovered. This team of 6 people was the Wolf Fang Special Warfare Team. They quietly entered the city under the leadership of their captain, Skinny Monkey. With their vigorous skills and flexible bodies, they didn't attract the attention of the guards at all. They quietly came to the street 100 meters away from He-Wei's mansion. No one spoke and they communicated with hand signals. Skinny Monkey made a few special warfare movements in a row, telling his team members that the target was in front of them. The 6 people moved forward in 3 directions. One person was responsible for the arrangements on the left, one person was responsible for the security on the right, and the last person followed him to climb over the wall and open the gate from the inside. They moved forward like a cat, and even when they walked they didn't make the slightest sound. After smoothly arriving in front of the gate, Skinny Monkey looked at his team member and made an OK gesture. The team member bent down and held his hands together. Skinny Monkey's body gently jumped onto the arm, and then the arm suddenly lifted, easily sending Skinny Monkey, who was less than 100 pounds, to the wall of the mansion. Everything was as smooth as flowing water. In fact, just this movement alone was practiced countless times, and it was only because of this that they could achieve such amazing results. The skinny monkey-like figure didn't immediately take action after jumping off the wall. Instead, he took out a night vision device from his bosom and put it on. After looking around and making sure that no one was paying attention to them, he gently jumped down and slowly opened the gate of the mansion. Then he let the group of 6 into the mansion. It was midnight and He-Wei was sleeping soundly. In his dream, he had already left with Yes-hen and went to another place to live, and he had conquered a large territory. At this time he was preparing to return to the great Ming Dynasty in high spirits and rebuild his glory. Suddenly he felt an itch in front of his nose, waking him up from his sleep. He-Wei narrowed his eyes and looked outside. He casually flipped over when he suddenly stopped, as if he had thought of something. He turned around and opened his eyes to see Skinny Monkey looking at him with a smile on his face. Just now, when He-Wei was in a daze, he seemed to have seen a figure beside the bed. He wasn't sure if his eyes were playing tricks on him, so he thought that he was still dreaming. When He-Wei turned around again, he was finally sure that everything he saw was real. Right now, there really was someone standing on his bed, staring at him fiercely. "You." Out of instinct, He-Wei wanted to shout, but as soon as the word "you" left his mouth, he felt a sharp pain in his lower abdomen. He had taken a heavy punch and his entire body was bent over. Under the unbearable pain, He-Wei found it difficult to breathe. Suddenly, a sharp dagger appeared and slashed his left arm. Blood immediately flowed out. He-Wei, who had wanted to ease the pain, couldn't help but cry out in pain. "You can scream, but after that your tongue will be gone. I guarantee that you won't be able to make a sound for the rest of your life. Do you believe me?" The smiling face got closer and closer, and a voice that made one's heart as cold as ice rang in his ears. He-Wei, who was afraid of death, saw that his left arm was still bleeding. How could he not know that the other party was serious? He immediately said softly, "No. I won't scream anymore. Hero, please spare my life. Please spare my life." As expected, He-Wei was a person who was afraid of death. He was afraid that the information he had was wrong, so he had to waste more time talking. Now that he had found his weakness, the rest of the matter would be much easier to handle. It's easy to avoid suffering. Do as I say. In the quiet night, orders were sent out from the residents, and the entire Iji village started to move. Regardless of whether it was those who were on duty or those who were sleeping in their homes, they all received news from He-Wei's personal guards that they were to gather immediately. The general had an order to pass down. Although many people were unhappy and some were even cursing, they remembered what leader Yes-hen said before he left. If anyone dared to disobey General He-Wei's orders, it was equivalent to disrespecting him. That person would be dismembered by 5 horses. Even though everyone was unhappy, they could only suppress their dissatisfaction and head towards the He residence. The candlelight in the He residence's meeting room wasn't very bright. Only He Wei's shadow could be seen clearly. Even the figures of the personal guards beside him couldn't be seen clearly. However, at this moment no one cared so much. This was because just a moment ago, He Wei revealed a piece of news that they didn't expect. Everyone, in a sand dune 10 miles away from our town, there are 2,000 5-star army cavalrymen hiding there. They are preparing to attack our Yiji village tomorrow morning. What? The 5-star army's cavalrymen? Did they really come? That's too fast. They only have 2,000 cavalrymen. They are underestimating us. Let them come. When the time comes, we will show them our power and let them know that our Yiji village is a land of death. That's right. Let's go back and prepare. We will definitely teach them a lesson tomorrow. The generals had different opinions, but their meaning was basically the same. They were all preparing their defense and waiting for the 5-star army to come and die. However, this wasn't the result that He Wei wanted to see. Seeing that no one was following his train of thought, he couldn't help but cough lightly and say, "What? Everyone is thinking about how to defend. Don't you know that the best defense is offense?" Offense? When this word came out from He Wei's mouth, it indeed shocked many people. Everyone looked at him as if they didn't know him. He Wei was a famous defense expert. Why did he suddenly change his mind and want to take the initiative to attack? How could He Wei not know what everyone was thinking when they looked at him? It was true that he didn't want to take the initiative to attack, but he couldn't control the fact that the personal guards beside him were disguised as Skinny Monkey and the others. He didn't forget how those personal guards who were supposed to protect him died tragically in front of him. Slash after slash, more than half of their flesh was cut off, but they were still alive. That feeling scared him so much that he didn't know how many times he peed. He Wei didn't want to end up like those people, so he had to complete the mission given to him by Skinny Monkey and the others. He could only continue. What? Do you really think that this general doesn't know how to attack? Let me tell you, there wasn't a suitable opportunity before. It's different now. The enemy only has 2,000 cavalrymen and they aren't prepared at all. This is the time for us to launch a sneak attack. If we do it well, those war horses will be ours and the prisoners will become our slaves. No matter how you look at it, it's worth a try. Naturally, if everyone doesn't have such thoughts, then just pretend that I didn't say anything. Tomorrow we will just fight a defensive battle. At most, we will just watch the 5-star army escape from under our eyes after being defeated. When they heard that taking the initiative to attack would give them so much spoils of war, all the generals' eyes lit up with excitement. Everything was good about following He Wei. In the past, it wasn't like the Baiming army didn't try to attack them. However, they all failed and didn't pay much of a price. However, there was one point. Their spoils of war were too little. It could even be said that there was almost nothing. This was all because they only defended and never took the initiative to attack. Even when they saw the enemy retreat after failing to attack the city, they never took the initiative to attack. Thus, what benefits would there be for them? On the battlefield, if one wanted to develop and strengthen themselves, they had to continuously win battles. Not only could this increase the morale of the army, more importantly, it could also allow them to seize more resources and strengthen themselves through battles. Everyone was clear about this logic. As the saying goes, a horse won't get fat without feeding at night. For an army, the spoils of war after winning a battle would be so much that they could keep a lot of private goods. Now that the opportunity was placed in front of them, who would back off? General, he is right. Since the opportunity is right, I and my 1,000 cavalrymen will definitely participate in the battle. With the first general stepping forward, the others naturally wouldn't back off. Immediately, the 3,000 cavalrymen, including the leader of the 500 outlaws, all stepped forward, unwilling to be left behind. Everyone jumped forward. He Wei's face revealed a difficult expression as he said, "If all of you want to go out, then there must be people guarding the town. General He, let's go and return quickly. It's just 10 miles of land. We have 3,500 men against 2,000 cavalrymen. Furthermore, we launched a surprise attack. We can end the battle in less than 2 hours. In such a short time, there won't be any problems with the town." That's right. There aren't any other enemies nearby. It's just a few hours. That's right. Anyway, whoever wants to stay is fine. We have to go out and fight. Of course, we have to go out too. Everyone took the initiative to express their desire to fight. He Wei couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. He could finally complete the mission given to him by Shouho. However, he still pretended to be in a difficult position and said, "Since that's the case, let's go and return quickly." "Ah, understood." The group of generals revealed looks of joy. Then, everyone quickly left the He residence and headed to the barracks. Everyone was afraid that if they were too slow, they wouldn't be able to reap the benefits. In less than an hour, all the soldiers in EG village had left the town. Other than some of the captains who stayed at home, there wasn't a single person who could leave. The 3,000 cavalrymen didn't even leave a single one behind. In the He residence, He Wei turned around and looked at Shouho, who was dressed like a bodyguard, and said, "Hero, I've done as you said. Can you spare my life?" "Ah, don't worry. As I said before, as long as you're obedient, you won't suffer." Hearing Shouho's words, He Wei couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. However, Shouho's next sentence made him so angry that he almost fainted. "We won't let you suffer, but we will definitely take your life. Bugnam of Gojoseon said that we can show mercy to anyone, but not to traitors." Chapter 1197. You guys don't keep your word. Hearing that he couldn't avoid death, He Wei mustered up his courage and shouted at Skinny Monkey, "I'm not breaking my promise. I only said that I wouldn't let you suffer. Now that I've killed you, I fulfilled my promise, right?" "Ah." Skinny Monkey laughed out loud. Then, a huge scimitar appeared in his hand and he raised it up high. The 3,500 Walla army soldiers who left the city excitedly chased after each other until they reached the sand dunes 10 miles away. However, they didn't see any sign of the 5-star army. Instead, they did find a lot of hoofprints. Some experienced soldiers concluded that there was a cavalry unit that stopped here for quite some time. However, they didn't know if it was the 5-star army. "Sigh, we're still too late. Let's go back." Seeing their prey escape, although they were unhappy, at least the news was correct. They just didn't know why the enemy left so quickly. The 3,000 Walla army soldiers came quickly and returned even faster. In the blink of an eye, they were back at the east gate of Jizinai. Then they lined up and walked in. Many of them were yawning and looked dispirited. Speaking of which, they rushed in excitedly but ended up empty-handed. Anyone would be dispirited. However, their lazy appearance quickly disappeared. Because when they were halfway through the gate, the sound of arrows piercing through the air suddenly rose and fell, one after another. Some of the unprepared Walla cavalry were killed on the spot, and some because they dodged quickly enough, they were only injured by the arrows. For a moment, the sound of cursing could be heard incessantly. He Wei's original plan to deal with the enemy was now used on the Walla cavalry. When countless arrows and ropes suddenly appeared, the Walla cavalry perfectly explained the proverb, spinning a cocoon around their own feet. Those who walked in front kept charging forward, but they were constantly killed. Those who walked in the middle were the first to be attacked by the arrows and suffered the most casualties. They had almost no fighting power left. Only the people at the back of the group were quick to react. Seeing that they could not advance any further, they chose to retreat. But just as they turned their horses around and left the east gate, 2 torchlit troops came from afar. One was commanded by Tong Long, the commander of the Liaodong Cavalry Regiment, and the other was commanded by Zhao Xing, the deputy commander. They covered each other from the left and right as they charged forward. "There's an ambush outside too. Run." The remaining Walla cavalry did not know how many enemies there were. They only knew that if they did not run now, they would not be able to escape later. Once again, there was no suspense in the chase. When dawn arrived, the results of the battle were tabulated. In this battle, more than 800 Walla cavalry were killed and more than 2,000 were captured. Only about 100 escaped. 500 desperados, those fugitives who had committed crimes in various places and fled here, were all killed. In the words of Bugnam of Gojoseon, there was no need for people who had committed crimes and escaped to survive and waste food. When a person was used to reaping without sowing, it would be difficult for 1 in 10 people to calm down and do things properly. Even so, it was better not to bring these dangers into society and harm others. They only sent out 6 Langya Special Force members to take down Iji at the lowest cost. The result of this battle made Tong Long and Zhao Xing very satisfied and surprised. They did not know how many such secret troops Bugnam of Gojoseon had. They only knew that as long as they were devoted and loyal, they would absolutely not end up like He Wei. Iji became the new base of the Liaodong Cavalry Regiment. They would pay the price. He Wei was stuck here like a nail, blocking the Walla cavalry from entering the desert. Chaotic Well City. Under the constant urging of Yes Hen, the army was finally ready. Among them there were 110,000 elite cavalry. During this time Bomu also recruited 30,000 men in Chaotic Well City. 20,000 of them were cavalry, and 10,000 were responsible for escorting food and supplies. With 140,000 men and horses in hand, Yesen had a feeling that the world was his. But this feeling did not last long. He saw the deserters running out of Iji and knew that his escape route had been blocked. "Bastard Bugnam of Gojosian wants to kill me?" Yesen roared and slammed his fist on the wooden door in front of him. Blood flowed out of his right fist. Bomu called people to bandage Yeshen's wound and advised, "Leader, don't be anxious. The more you act like this, the more you will fall into Bugnam of Gojosian's trap. Now we might as well stay in Chaotic Well City. I believe that with this city, we should be able to block the 5-star army. As long as we stay here for a long time, the other surrounding forces will not stand idly by." At this time Bomu still did not want to leave Chaotic Well City. Perhaps it was the past few years that allowed him to gradually adapt to this place, to a stable life with a residence. No. As soon as his right hand was bandaged, Yesen took it back and said loudly, "Retreat is a must. Can't you see that this is Bugnam of Gojosian blocking my escape route? Is he afraid that I will leave here? Since he is afraid, then of course I will leave here." "You still want to leave? Leader, then where should we go? Biming behind us? Didn't you say that they have already joined forces with the 5-star army?" Bomu knew that he could not persuade Yesen anymore. If he did, he would be punished. He could only take back his thoughts and suggestions and ask where they should go. He did not answer immediately. Instead, after thinking for a long time, he said something shocking, "Go to Ilili." Ilili? At this moment, not only Bomu but also Chao Lu, who had just been promoted to become Yeshen's deputy general, repeated with a face full of shock. Looking at the shocked expressions of the two, Yesen could not help but laugh. "Look, even you two are so shocked. This must be something that even Bugnam of Gojosian would not think of. Then let's go there. From here we will go northwest through Chili Mountain and Majuan Mountain, and head towards Ilili." Bomu imagined the path in his mind. Then he said worriedly, "But if we go from there we will have to pass through the Shazhou guards and Hami guards. Will Biming allow us to pass through? Even if they don't allow us, we have an army of 140,000. Even if they have 2 guts, they won't dare to have any ideas about us. Alright, this matter is decided. Haha, if I use the Han people's words, it is called diverting the trouble. Haha, they want to put this leader to death. I want to see what the 5-star army can do to me." Yesen was excited about his bold move. In his opinion, if he let the 5-star army become enemies with the 3 powers in Ilili, Yang Qindong would also have to give up and would only be able to watch him leave. Of course, if Yang Qindong still chased after him, then he would join forces with the other 3 powers. At that time, they would have another 500,000 to 600,000 soldiers. The reason why they were unable to take down Genesis City was because the Biming army was not strong enough. This time, with a new ally, he was full of confidence. After making the decision, early the next morning, Yesen brought his 140,000 soldiers and the treasures that he had plundered over the years and left Chaotic Well City. This news was also discovered by the scouts of the 1st Division that night. The news was sent to Yang Qindong, who had just arrived at the foot of Shajing City, through a telegram. In front of him was Shajing City. He could already see Shibi bringing Kong Ji and the others out to welcome him. Yang Qindong returned the telegram to Beta Persei and sneered, "This Yesen is a character. His reaction is quick. Since this is the case, then I will destroy Ilili as well. This piece of land should have been included in the territory of the Han people. In this case, inform Su Dei secretly that his chance to perform a meritorious deed has come. Inform the new army to go directly to Ilili and let the army be on standby there. Inform the 1st Cavalry Division to also go to Ilili." After issuing several orders in succession, Yang Qindong rode the White Dragon and headed towards the White Dragon. Right in front of him, Shibi and the other officers of the new 2nd Army all knelt on the ground to welcome the arrival of Yang Qindong. Yang Qindong had long said that soldiers only needed to salute when they met. But this time the new 2nd Army had rebelled and returned. Although Yang Qindong was clear about the matter from the beginning to the end and he did not object, they had still done something wrong. Now they were kneeling to express an attitude of asking for forgiveness. Yang Qindong rode the White Dragon and did not let them get up as soon as they met. Instead, he let them kneel on the ground. Speaking of the new 2nd Army, although there was a general trend, it was also a fact that Shibi had mistakenly used Su Yuan. If not, the new Second Army would not have been in chaos before attacking, giving the Beiming army a chance, and Beiming would not have been able to attack the beginning city without any worries. Along the way, Yang Qindong rode very slowly. After about 15 minutes, he deliberately slowed down and arrived in front of Shibi and the others. At this moment, these officers of the new Second Army were all kneeling there and did not even dare to raise their heads. They were not the only ones. Even Vice Division Commander Na Risong and Division Commander Dai Qua, who had marched with Yang Qindong, did not dare to say anything. They were all frightened by the scene in front of them. When Na Risong first met Yang Qindong, the beginning city was not even there. At that time, although Yang Qindong was somewhat heroic and had killed many people, he could only be considered a small vassal. Although his growth was too fast, Na Risong did not have an intuitive feeling because he was content with staying in a corner. Now that he saw the officers wearing the Major General's uniform and a group of senior colonels kneeling on the ground, the shock he felt was quite strong. It also made him understand that Yang Qindong was no longer the amiable young man he had met back then. If he was angry, he could kill people at any time. Chapter 1198. There was no need to mention Dai Qua. To be chosen by Qin Bo and become the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division of the Far Eastern Army, his character was naturally extremely proud. Because of Commander Qin Bo's trust in him, he had heard of the 6th young master's name many times. However, seeing was believing. He did not expect Bugnam of Gojoseon to be so young. Since he was left behind by Qin Bo and came to Yang Qindong's camp, he could often talk to Yang Qindong. Over time, the mysterious feeling disappeared. On the contrary, in his heart, this Bugnam of Gojoseon was as gentle and humble as the man next door. This was really different from what he had imagined. He had heard that the commander often fought in all directions, and when he was angry he would command the army and blood would flow like a river. But until today he saw the other side of Yang Qindong. Seeing so many officers kneeling on the ground without even daring to breathe, he finally knew what was called authority. It was really a kind of thing that could only be understood and not explained. After an unknown period of time, a sigh finally came out. Okay, get up. Let's talk in the city. With such a simple sentence, the momentum that seemed like a storm just now disappeared in an instant. Many people could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. The people kneeling on the ground were even able to breathe heavily after this sentence. Yes. Shibi was covered in cold sweat. When he felt that the pressure was gone, he quickly responded and was the first to get up. However, he still did not dare to raise his head. He did not even ride a horse and walked in front to lead the way. In the military headquarters of the new Second Army in Shajing City, Yang Qindong sat on the high seat. Shibi and the other officers of the new Second Army stood on both sides. This time no one knelt down. It was because Yang Qindong said that kneeling just now was for the people inside and outside the city to see. If they did something wrong, they would be punished. As for now, they had already closed the door, so they were a family. There was no need for such superficial things. Shirbei, what's the situation with the new Second Army? After everyone greeted each other, Yang Qindong's gaze fell on the first seat, which was also the only one wearing a general's uniform. 6th young master, the morale of the new Second Army is still good. Everyone is very happy and excited after knowing that they can return to the 5-star army, Shepard reported carefully. This is enough to prove that both the soldiers and the civilians have a scale in their hearts. Whoever treats them well, they will treat them better. Yang Qindong nodded in satisfaction. This is also a good leadership from you as the commander of the army. I wouldn't dare. 6th young master, your subordinate is guilty. How could Shepard dare to claim credit for himself? It was precisely because he didn't use the right people that he almost destroyed the entire new Second Army. If that was really the case, he really wouldn't have the face to see Yang Qindong. Well, this matter is over. There's no need to talk about it anymore. Along the way, I saw that the morale of the new Second Army is still good, but there are a lot fewer soldiers. I know your organization after the turmoil and the war. How about this? You don't have to help us this time in the War of Wara. It's better to restore the organization and the original fighting force first. As for how many soldiers you need, you can choose some from the existing prisoners. If it's not enough, you can send someone to the beginning city to find Division Commander Yang Si. He has more than 100,000 prisoners. It's enough. Thank you, Bugnam of Gojoseon. The officers in the hall were very happy when they heard that they could immediately restore the organization. Because in the eyes of the general, Only when he had enough soldiers at his disposal would he have enough confidence to guarantee that he would dare to fight no matter what kind of enemy he faced. Well, if there's nothing else, you can leave first. Commander Shepard, stay. Yang Qindong's time was precious and he couldn't stay any longer. After hearing this, the officers saluted one by one and left one after another. Shepard stayed behind. In the waiting hall, except for Yang Qindong, Beta Persei and Long Wei, when there was no one else, Shepard knelt on the ground again. This time he said in a louder voice, "Sixth young master, I'm guilty. Get up quickly." Unlike outside the city, Yang Qindong took the initiative to step forward and help Shepard up. Then the two of them sat next to each other on the steps in the hall. Yang Qindong took out a pack of Bugnam of Gojosian cigarettes and handed it over. Bugnam of Gojosian cigarettes were now only Yang Qindong's special supply, which was equivalent to the existence of red pandas in the future. The difference was that such cigarettes couldn't be bought with money. Usually he would only be able to smoke them when he rewarded others. Shepard originally didn't smoke, but since Su Yuan's rebellion, he stayed in the mansion all day and gradually developed the habit of smoking. When he saw Yang Qindong handing him a cigarette, he quickly took it with both hands and said, "Thank you, sixth young master." "Well, there are no outsiders here, so there's no need to be so polite. Sai, speaking of what happened before, you've been wronged." Hearing the grievance, Shepard's eyes were full of tears. He was not afraid of death, but he was afraid that others would misunderstand him. Tears flowed out of his eyes as he choked and said, "Sixth young master, I'm not wronged. As long as you believe in me, I have full motivation." "Well, you can rest assured about this. I believe in you from the beginning to the end. Otherwise, do you think Shajing City is really impregnable? Do you think you can still live until now? You've been secretly assassinated by the wolf Fang I sent." Yang Qindong laughed. He wasn't boasting. Although Shepard stayed in the military headquarters of the new Second Army every day, the defense level here was very ordinary. As long as he gave an order, Tai Hu would naturally help him to complete it. In fact, it was not that no one had made such a suggestion at the beginning, but it was rejected by him. "Thank you. Thank you, sixth young master, for your trust." Shepard naturally knew that this was the truth. He knew even more clearly that with his little strength, once he was targeted by the Wolf Fang Special Forces, he would not be able to escape. Trust is trust. Just like when you pretended to surrender to Baiming, you also believed that Ben Wang would believe you, so you dared to do such a thing, right? Yang Qindong patted Shepard's shoulder and said with a smile, "This was not wrong. If it were other masters, even if the subordinates wanted to pretend to surrender, they would be worried about the master's suspicion. In this way the fake would become real. But in Shepard's case, a fake would always be a fake. Once the opportunity came, he would immediately return to the five-star army. This trust was not something that ordinary masters could achieve. This was the so-called two good men and one good man. If there was a villain among the two, then things would not have such a perfect ending. Now that the matter was out in the open, Shepard was not as awkward as before. Occasionally there would even be a smile on his face. "Shepard, the restoration of the new Second Army's organization needs to be accelerated. I will not hide it from you. This time not only will I make a move on Yeshen, but I will also make a move on Ely. This is a big war in which your new Second Army will also play an important role." When it came to business, the smile on Yang Qindong's face disappeared and was replaced by a serious face. "Sixth young master, please tell me." "Very good. Next, I will arrange 4 things for you. First, the new Second Army needs to be busy restoring its organization and restoring its combat power. Second, guard the 2 cities of Shajing and Jingzhou well. These 2 cities will become an important supply line for our logistics and provisions. There must not be any big problems. Third, repair the road. Build a road from Shajing City to Ely so that it will be convenient for transportation. If something happens, we can quickly reinforce it. Fourth, if necessary, Ben Wang may mobilize the new Second Army to the west to help. At that time, I hope that the army you send will have enough combat power. Can you do it?" Yang Qindong said this in a serious tone. This time the opponent might be as many as 500,000 or 600,000, and there were many elites. In order to prevent unexpected things from happening, he needed to have enough fresh troops. The new Second Army was undoubtedly the closest and most likely to come in handy. This was also one of the important reasons why Yang Qindong wanted to see Shepard and talk to him in detail. "No problem. I promise to complete the task." Shepard suddenly stood up and saluted. "Okay, I believe you. If you need money, provisions, or soldiers, you can apply to First City. They will do it." But I still have to say the same thing. I need you to quickly stand up again. Ben Wang needs the new second army. Yang Chendong also stood up and threw the cigarette butt in his hand on the ground, and said with a solemn and serious face. The telegram was sent through the radio to the team that served Su Dei, and the news was quickly reported to General Su. Today, Su Dei, after the incident in First City, had become the confidant of Tsingguang's deputy commander. For this matter, Tsingguang deliberately found Commander Sun Hong and forced Su Dei to be his disciple. Unfortunately, Tsingguang also offended Admiral Wuxia Chronicles and Liaodong Iron Cavalry General Fang Dingshan because of the incident in First City. In order to shirk the responsibility, the two of them had to follow Tsingguang's instructions and put the blame on Shi Wanshan and Rong Xiao. Now that the emperor wasn't going to pursue the matter, the two of them naturally couldn't admit to this grievance. After they pressured Sun Hong's troops, Tsingguang, who was originally guarding Datong, was assigned to the Hatao region. Compared to Datong, this place was much poorer. More importantly, it was not far away from Datong's headquarters, Chaojing City. With the enemy by his side, Tsingguang sometimes could not even sleep well. He was afraid that the other side would attack him. If that was the case, how could he be their opponent? As Tsingguang's most valued confidant, Su Dei became an important minister. He usually trained the soldiers and was ready to fight with the Walla cavalry at any time. When the team sent the telegram, Su Dei was training the soldiers in the barracks. It could be said that he was very hard-working because in his view, these soldiers were not trained for the Baiming imperial court, but for Bugnam of Gojoseon. Eating Baiming's salary and food, training the 5-star army, the feeling of satisfaction could not be described with words. Chapter 1199. In the big tent, Su Dei dismissed his subordinates and looked at the team member who was also a soldier. His eyes were filled with anticipation. What's wrong? Did Bugnam of Gojoseon receive news? Is the 5-star army going to attack Chaos Well City? General, I don't know what to say, please take a look at the telegram. The team member had already read the telegram. Because of this, he didn't know how to describe it. He didn't even understand why Chaos Well City was given to Baiming. Was it just to let the general make a new contribution? Looking at the team member's puzzled face, Su Dei took the telegram and his whole body shook. Obviously, he didn't expect Bugnam of Gojoseon to give him another city in order to consolidate his position. Moreover, it was the headquarters of the Wara. That's great. Su Dei smashed his fist into the air. After about 10 breaths, he seemed to have figured everything out and said with a chuckle. The team member who delivered the telegram couldn't understand. General, why are you so happy to give Baiming a city? It was no wonder that the team member asked this question. Obviously, he had some doubts about Su Dei's performance. In his opinion, shouldn't the general be on the side of the 5-star army? But it didn't seem to be the case now. What do you know? Su Dei smiled. It's true that Bugnam of Gojoseon gave us a city, but think about it carefully. What? Since we can use Baiming's money to train Bugnam of Gojoseon soldiers, why can't we defend the city for him? The team member scratched his head in confusion. It was clear that he still didn't understand what was going on. So I don't think too much about it. You go back first, I'll go find Tsingguang. Su Dei already reminded the team member. If the team member still didn't understand, there was no need for him to explain. He urgently needed to report the news to Tsingguang. He had a feeling that after this great contribution, Tsingguang would be promoted. If that was the case, it would be more beneficial for him to take control of more Baiming army. Su Dei was right. The reason why Yang Chendong sent him a telegram to occupy Chaos Well City was to let him help defend the city. After all, what Yang Chendong wanted to do now was to take Yeshin's War Wara, take over Ili and completely deal with the western side, and complete the final siege of Baiming. In the face of such an important strategic goal, he wouldn't divide his troops to defend some cities to distract himself. After Su Dei received this information, he rode on a horse to Tsingguang's residence in the Ningxia Ministry of Defense. He then told him the information he just received and his thoughts. Tsingguang was playing with a parrot in his backyard and teaching it to speak. When he heard Su Dei's report, he was so shocked that the bowl of bird food in his hand fell to the ground. He suddenly turned around and asked with joy in his eyes, "General Su, is this news true? Is someone deliberately luring us into action?" "Absolutely not," Su Dei said in a very confident tone. "Deputy Chief, think about it, in the face of the 5-star army's strong attack, how could the War Wara have the ability to make trouble for us? What kind of trap would they set for us? They probably don't even have the time to express their goodwill to us. Why would they do something like this? In addition, Yeshen of the War Wara has fought against the 5-star army several times and returned in defeat. I'm afraid there's a shadow in his heart, so his move to the west is completely logical. What do you think? That's right. After a moment of thought, Xinguang nodded and then his face was full of joy. If that's the case, then our chance has come. Once we take back Chaotic Well City, the East Gate and the West Gate will be connected. If that's the case, we can report this to the Emperor. The Emperor will definitely be very happy. That's right. When that time comes, perhaps this general will have to change the way I address you as commander. Su Dei's face was also full of joy as he complimented. When that time comes, I'll promote you to deputy chief. The happy Xinguang immediately made a promise. Thank you, chief. Su Dei's face was indeed full of joy. He wasn't happy because he could become a deputy chief, but because with this identity he could control more troops. As for whether he was qualified for this position because he was still young, if it was in the past, he wouldn't have dared to say. But now, the Emperor of Baiming has begun to pay attention to generals. With Xinguang's full recommendation and Bugnam of Gojoseon's secret help, it was not impossible to achieve. After making a promise, Xinguang laughed again and said to Su Dei, "How about this? I'll immediately give you 20,000 troops and quickly go to Disordered Well City. Remember, if things don't go well or if you find that something is wrong, come back immediately. We don't have to make contributions, but we can't lose our strength." Deputy Chief, don't worry, I understand. In his heart, he looked down on Xinguang. Under these conditions, he still didn't dare to lead his troops, and instead wanted him to lead his troops to attack. It had to be said that Xinguang was too cowardly. Of course, the more cowardly a person was, the easier it was to control him. This would be very beneficial to his future work. After receiving the order, Su Dei led his troops out. 5 days later, the news came back that Disordered Well City had been successfully taken over. Good. Xinguang heartily laughed as he read the battle report from the scouts. He immediately ordered the memorial he had written to be sent to the capital of Northern Ming at the fastest speed possible. At the same time, he had also prepared enough banknotes for his trusted aides to go to the capital. This time he wanted to use this opportunity to become a commander, a true great general who commanded an army. On the same day, Yeshen, who was leading his army across the mountains, also received the same news. The Baiming army had seized the opportunity to take over Disordered Well City. This Baiming doesn't have the ability to fight, but they're quite fast at seizing territory. After hearing the news, Yeshen's face was filled with anger. It was clear that he was very angry at the other party's actions. Previously they had been allies, but now they had become enemies. No one would feel good about this. Seeing that Yeshen's mood wasn't too good, Deputy Chief Chao Lu walked up and said, "Chief, let's put the matter of Baiming aside for now. Since we have already walked out of Disordered Well City, even if Baiming doesn't take it, the 5-star army will send troops to take it. Comparatively speaking, it's more advantageous for us to have the Baiming army occupy it. At least one day it will be easier for us to take it back." That's right, General Chao Lu is right. Chief, we must always look forward. The scouts at the front have sent news that Baiming's Hami guards and Shazhou guards are still biding their time. It seems like they are really afraid of us as we expected. General Beaumur also walked up and reported the current situation. We have an army of 140,000, and they only have a few thousand. It would be strange if they dared to move. Do they really think they are the 5-star army? Yeshen said angrily. Only the 5-star army, even if they only had a few hundred people, would dare to move against you. It had to be said that this kind of courage was very rare. At the mention of the 5-star army, Shibi asked with some lingering fear, "Where is the 5-star army now?" Reporting to Chief, the scouts have reported that they are currently gathering. It seems like they are waiting for something. Beaumur reported the news he had just received. Waiting? They must be waiting for Bugnam of Gojoseon to personally come. I just don't know if they have the courage to come this time. If they do, then they won't be able to return. That's right, the messengers we sent out should be arriving soon, right? Whether or not we can stand firm this time is inseparable from their support. Shibi suddenly thought of something and asked Beaumur. Originally there were 2 armed forces from Yurkiang and Turpan, but Yeshen didn't have any contact with them before. If they rashly went to look for them, they might end up being rejected. It was completely different in Yurkiang. After all, they had fought side by side before and there was some friendship between them. Counting the days, it should be here. Beaumur reported. The truth was as he said. The messenger had already arrived at the capital of Yurkiang, and was warmly received by Prime Minister Ali Pu. If Ali Pu couldn't see through Yeshin's ploy, then he wouldn't be worthy of his title as a wise prime minister. However, he couldn't do anything about it. After all, he had fought with the Wala cavalry before and knew how strong they were. If he stubbornly blocked them and didn't let them come forward, they might end up fighting first. That would only benefit the 5-star army. As the saying goes, one should choose the lesser of two evils. In the end, after discussing with the king of Baalide, he decided to accept Yeshin's wara. No matter what, this was still a considerable force. Before this, Ali Pu had already reached an agreement with Yurkiang and Turpan. Everyone believed that in the face of an external enemy, they could put aside their previous disagreements and unite against them. As for their own matters, they could settle it behind closed doors. There was another clause in the agreement. Once the 5-star army really killed their way over, no matter which faction they attacked, the other two factions would have to send their troops unconditionally. This was just to protect their own pride and let everyone know that even if the Mongol Empire was no longer around as their descendants, they were not people who could be bullied as they wished. As such, a huge rock was formed, blocking in front of Yang Qindong and the 5-star army. At this time, Yang Qindong had already walked out of Shajing City. The army had a smooth journey and arrived at Yiji. Here they met up with the 1st Division of the World's Cavalry, the 1st Division, and the Liaodong Cavalry Reinforced Regiment. At this point, along with the scouts and light cavalry of the new army, Narisong's 20,000 Mongol troops, and the 1st Cavalry Division of the Far Eastern Army, Yang Qindong had over 100,000 troops by his side. Looking at the energetic officers in the tent, Yang Qindong said in a booming voice, "Prepare in 2 days. Send troops to Basikuo Mountain." Chapter 1200. Baiming, the capital of Great Tang. A report of victory from the Dongtao region arrived in the imperial palace and was delivered to Emperor Zhu Qiu. The autumn rations had just arrived, and the Ministry of Revenue was in the process of collecting them. The imperial court had also raised the price, and Zhu Qiu had intentionally spread the word that if anyone dared to oppose the imperial court, they would be prepared to settle the score after autumn. Just when Zhu Qiu was breathing a sigh of relief and thinking that it wouldn't be long before he could send his army to the plains and display the glory of Baiming, the report of victory made his already good mood even better. Su Yozhen, who had long since received Yang Qindong's orders, had also walked into the imperial court. In truth, it wasn't just Su Yozhen. Some of the officials who had been bribed by Tsingguang's silver had also submitted memorials. The general idea was that Tsingguang was a pillar of the country and that the imperial court had to put him in an important position and promote him. Good. A general who can fight should be promoted. Haha, who says that our Baiming doesn't have a general? Look at the report from our beloved minister Tsingguang. In order to capture Chaotic Well City, he fought a bloody battle for 7 days and killed more than 30,000 enemies in the end, returning Chaotic Well City to the embrace of our Baiming. Good. Come, write an imperial edict and make Tsingguang the commander-in-chief of the Shaanxi army. He will be in charge of all military affairs in Shaanxi. Su Yozhen didn't even need to use much effort for Tsingguang to be promoted. Not long after, memorials thanking him for his favor were delivered. At the same time, memorials for the promotion of Su Dei and a few other generals were also delivered. Su Yozhen had long since helped to establish relations with the Bureau of Military Personnel, so Su Dei had become the deputy commander-in-chief of the Shaanxi army. With Tsingguang's complete trust and importance, he held a large number of troops in his hands. By the time Yang Qindong learned of this news through the telegram, he had already led his army through the Basikuo Mountains and was 50 li away from the important city of Baiming 8 li. Very good. Yang Qindong was naturally very satisfied when he saw that Su Dei was promoted to the position of deputy commander-in-chief, and also became the youngest deputy commander-in-chief in the Baiming army. However, he put it aside after looking at it. Right now, the most important thing was how to face the opponent and enemy in front of him. After returning the telegram to Beta Persei, Yang Qindong stood in front of the sand table and asked, "Where is Master Lu?" "Young master, your master and the others are still 200 miles away from us. They should be able to reach us in a few days. They won't delay our mission," Beta Persei reported. Yang Qindong lightly nodded his head and said, "The messenger sent to Turpan has set off." "He did. I sent Ba Daojiang over. That kid wants to put on a good show. Yang Er snickered. Ba Daojiang? Hearing that the captain of the Black Cavalry was the messenger, Yang Qindong couldn't help but smile and said, "Who came up with this idea?" However, Ba Daojiang is brave and resourceful. Most importantly, he has a strong military aura. He is really a good choice. Who said that diplomats must be eloquent? At the very least, it depends on the person. Take Yang Qindong for example. He believed that he should send out an envoy based on the type of enemy he was dealing with. Since he was going to use troops against Turpan, the envoy he sent out couldn't be too weak. Ba Daojiang was a member of the Black Knight's Dragon Guards and had followed Yang Qindong for many years. When he spoke with others, he would occasionally display the powerful aura of a soldier. Naturally, he was a suitable candidate. Seeing that Yang Qindong was still very satisfied, Beta Persei also smiled, but then he still asked worriedly, "Young master, do you think they will make things difficult for Ba Daojiang?" "They won't dare," Xian said in a very confident tone. "Not to mention that the messenger is not killed in a war. Just the fact that the 5-star army is coming in strong means that the king of Turpan will not make things difficult for the messenger sent by the 5-star army unless there is water in his brain and he doesn't want to have a good ending." The sixth young master is so confident that Beta Persei also breathed a sigh of relief. Beta Persei has a lot of feelings for these Black Cavalry who follow the young master every day, so he naturally doesn't want anything to happen to any of them. Things are as Yang Qindong expected. At this moment, Ba Daojiang is not in any danger. On the contrary, when facing the king of Turpan, Ba Daojiang's tone and attitude are neither servile nor overbearing. After following Yang Qindong for so long, Ba Daojiang's courage is not something that ordinary people can compare to. This time he took the initiative to ask Beta Persei for this mission because he wants to make a greater contribution. He has already received news that as Yang Xia's forces grow stronger, his territory grows, and his population grows, Bugnam of Gojoseon's safety becomes the most important. The number of Black Cavalry members was going to increase accordingly. It is said that the original 1,000 Long Wei will be expanded to 2,000, and Qiu Vi and Dao Xiao will be the 2 captains. Because the number of people will double and 2 vice-captains will be elected, he is aiming for this position. This news is not groundless. Resin City has already built the new Black Cavalry's battle armor and the soldiers' battle armor. It is said that many capable people have already signed up, and the new members are also in the process of being selected. With such a good thing, Ba Daojiang also wants to improve from a small captain, so he saw the identity of the messenger and coaxed Beta Persei for this mission. In order to do this to the best of his abilities, Ba Daojiang had put in a lot of effort. He had a clear understanding of the situation of the various factions in this region. This time when he met King Shiza, he laid out the facts and reasoned with him. The gist of it was that the Turpan Empire was facing a huge crisis, and as the front line of the various factions, surrendering to the 5-star army was the best choice. King Shiza is old, already 60 years old, and can be considered to be in the ranks of the oldest. However, the more a person is like this, the more afraid of death he is, especially when he is used to living a life of luxury. He does not want to take any risks. Previously, when Li Yi Erqiang and Turpan held a meeting, he felt that something is wrong. If he really wants to fall out with the 5-star army, then Turpan, who is located in the easternmost area, will be the first to bear the brunt. This makes him very comfortable. Unfortunately, the other 2 sides have expressed their agreement. His eldest son, Harden Barter, who is also the eldest prince who represented him in the meeting of the 3 sides, expressed his position without asking him. In order to protect his dignity, he wants to fight the 5-star army to the end. Because of this, when Harden Barter came back, Shiza put him under house arrest. At this time, Ba Daojiang, who represented the 5-star army, appeared as a messenger. As soon as he appeared, he helped him analyze the situation. In the end, he said that if Turpan does not surrender, then it will be a dead end. At that time, as the king, Shiza will be buried here. And the Turpan people who died because of the war will blame him for generations to come. Respected King Shiza, everywhere my 5-star army goes, there is no place that we do not win. Do you think that a small Turpan can stop us? If you insist on using your weapons, then the only outcome that awaits you will be death. On the contrary, if you are willing to surrender, then not only will your people not suffer as the king, you will be sent to a place with beautiful scenery and pleasant weather to live out the rest of your life. Haha, in fact, there are already many kings and leaders of other countries there. They are all living very well. You will not be lonely there, you will definitely quickly fall in love with it. At that time there won't be too few people serving you and your treatment won't be too low. Apart from losing a bit of power and freedom, everything else will be the same as it is now. You won't have to live in fear like you do now. How wonderful would that be? Ba Daojiang was originally a person of the pugilistic world. He was used to speaking human words. Often the dead could be revived by his words. Not to mention he had learned a lot from Yang Qindong over the years. His words were more reasonable and persuasive. The scene described by Ba Daojiang did not move Shiza, but there was one sentence that touched his heart. The five-star army was indeed very powerful. Facing such a powerful enemy, the possibility of Turpan being defeated was very high. If that was the case, as the king, he would be dead without a doubt. This was not something he wanted to see. Naturally, he wanted to surrender. Although it was a little embarrassing, at least he would be able to live. Furthermore, he would not have to worry for the rest of his life. Wasn't that a good thing? Esteemed envoy's suggestion is not bad. This king also does not want to become enemies with the five-star army. However, the situation in my country is a little different. The eldest prince and some of the important generals in the army do not seem to agree and insist on fighting with the five-star army. Shiza said with a slightly ugly expression. As he grew older, the eldest prince had slowly matured. He also had the ability to counterattack and the right to speak. In particular, the eldest prince and a few of the important generals in the army were like-minded. This made Shiza quite wary. This was also why, even though the eldest prince had violated the decree, Shiza could only confine him at home. He could not even lock him up in prison. Ba Daojiang naturally did not know this. The relationship between some of the royal family was not something that outsiders could easily find out. After all, people who were born in such a family were used to acting from a young age. How many of them were sincere in what they said? It was extremely difficult to grasp the true thoughts of these people. Because he did not know, Ba Daojiang thought that Shiza's words were an excuse. A look of disdain appeared in his eyes as he asked, "What? Does your majesty want to become enemies with the five-star army? Even if that's the case, there is no need to find such an unreasonable excuse." The truth was actually treated as an excuse by Ba Daojiang. Shiza did not know how to explain himself. Thinking that he could not become enemies with the five-star army, he hardened his heart and said, "Forget it. This king will express his attitude here. I do not want to become enemies with the five-star army. Therefore I choose to surrender." Chapter 12:01. The word, surrender, came out of King Siza's mouth with some difficulty. After all, he was the king of a country. How important was his face and dignity? But he really couldn't see any hope of victory, so he decided to surrender in the end. In his opinion, as long as he surrendered to the five-star army, after their army entered, even if the crown prince had any thoughts or dissatisfaction, he wouldn't be able to change the facts. This way the whole of Turpan would be spared from the flames of war. Ba Daojiang still wanted to persuade and even threaten Siza, but he didn't expect Siza to surrender so quickly. He couldn't help but be overjoyed. Haha, I knew that His Majesty is a smart person. Sure enough, it's true. After reaching a consensus, the conversation between the two sides became much more pleasant. After the final discussion, it was decided that the five-star army would enter 8 Mile City in 5 days. At that time, King Siza would give an order for them to fully cooperate with the five-star army. Then, when the five-star army arrived at Turpan City as the king, he would personally go out to welcome them to express his respect for King Wunan of Damiang. Ba Daojiang left with a happy face. The mission was completed, and it went so smoothly that it made him extremely happy. Originally, it would take more than 2 days to travel on a fast horse, but it took him less than 2 days to take a shortcut back to the five-star army's camp in front of 8 Mile City. Then he happily told the news to Yang Qindong. After knowing that Ba Daojiang had returned to the camp and really completed the mission of persuading the king of Turpan to surrender, Yang Qindong also smiled. Not bad, I didn't expect Ba Daojiang to have such ability. Not bad. Ah, young master, this should be due to the fame of our five-star army. Beta Persei also laughed. As the person in charge of the Black Cavalry, of course, he had to be modest. Ah. Yang Qindong laughed after hearing this. He pointed at Beta Persei and said, I didn't expect you to be modest. Alright, with this reward, Baojiang will be rewarded handsomely. Yes, thank you, young master. Beta Persei quickly saluted and laughed. Things went unexpectedly smoothly. The five-star army began to prepare to enter the city. Since the king of a country had made a promise and even wrote an imperial edict to Badaojiang, no one doubted it. After all, if there was a mistake, Siza, as the king, would be labeled as a lowly person. This was a very shameful thing for the king of a country. Even if he won the war, no one would trust him. But what if Saiza was no longer the king? Then wouldn't this imperial edict be nullified as well? Turpan's capital, Turpan City, the first prince's residence. Two tall and strong men were discussing something with a young man in the secret chamber of the prince's mansion. The young man had an extraordinary temperament, especially when he raised his hands and stamped his feet. He always gave people a very noble feeling. He was the first prince of Turpan, Harden Barter. It must be said that Harden Barter was a very capable person. In history, the rise of Turpan began from his generation. Later, after the famous Prime Minister Arab died because of old age, Harden Barter, who inherited the throne, took the opportunity to rise. In the end, his grandson unified the entire Yilianli region, turning the three forces into one. This was also the predecessor of the modern Xinjiang. Of course, such a person in history would not be willing to submit to the five-star army. As a prince, and the future leader of Turpan, Harden Barter advocated to go to war with the five-star army during the Three Kingdoms Conference, which caused his father to be angry. Harden Barter translated it into Chinese. The general idea was that he was resolute and heroic. How could such a person be willing to be grounded at home? Just like now, on the surface he was not allowed to go out, but the two most important generals in the army took the initiative to come to his door. The two men sitting opposite him were the important generals in charge of Turpan. They were called Shirigan, meaning storm, and Daichin, meaning war general. The reason why the two of them braved the taboo to appear in the first prince's mansion was because of one thing. Their spies in the palace had sent news that King Shiza secretly met with the messenger of the five-star army and reached an agreement to surrender. Since ancient times, whenever a country encountered a crisis, it was usually the generals that stood up. For them, dying on the battlefield seemed to be a kind of mission. Even if they died on the battlefield, it was also a great honor. The two generals were both ambitious people and had contributed to the rise of Turpan in history. How could such a person be willing to become a surrendered general without doing anything? However, they were only generals. Although they controlled a portion of the army, they could not refute the king's words. After thinking for a while, they came to the first prince's mansion. In their opinion, the first prince would definitely be the same as them. He would not surrender to the five-star army so easily. Harden Barter attached great importance to the arrival of these two important generals. He also learned about his father's decision from his spies in the palace. He was greatly disappointed, but at the same time he was also thinking of countermeasures. The arrival of these two generals gave him new hope and the determination to go all out. In the secret room, the three of them sat cross-legged. Without any moving opening words, Harden Barter expressed his will. Generals, although Turpan is not as powerful as the five-star army, it is impossible for us to surrender without doing anything. I also know that the two of you are courageous people and I also know why you are here. However, it seems that it is impossible to persuade my father. He even wrote the surrender edict. It is impossible for him to go back on his words. The only solution is... Harden Barter didn't finish his words immediately. After all, this kind of action was shameful in the eyes of many people and would be condemned by the officials of the country. The two generals of the rising sun didn't think too much. When they heard that there was a solution, their eyes lit up. They looked at Harden Barter expectantly and said, "First Prince, what solution do you have? Please tell us." "Yes, what do you need us to do? We will do our best." The other general, Daichin, also said. Harden Barter was waiting for these words. He didn't feel troubled and said, "If we want to solve this, we just need to make my father give up the throne. That way his edict won't be recognized by our Turpan kingdom. Of course we can't hurt father. After all, he has done a lot for Turpan. He is also my father, so after he abdicates, I will find a quiet place for him to retire and spend the rest of his life in peace." This was clearly an attempt to seize power for himself. The two generals couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air after witnessing such a momentous event. Even though they were unhappy with King Shiza's actions, he was still their king. If he rebelled, they wouldn't be able to bear the responsibility either. The two generals didn't speak. Harden Barter's heart skipped a beat. He knew that once he said something he had to do it. Otherwise, once the news was leaked, he would be the one to die. His father didn't only have him as a prince. If his father knew that he wanted to rebel, he wouldn't have a good ending. In other words, after he voiced his thoughts, he had no way out. Right now, he had to get the support of the two generals. Otherwise, what awaited him would be worse than death. The two of you are the backbone of my Turpan kingdom. All these years, the reason why the kingdom has been able to stabilize and the people have been able to live in peace is completely inseparable from your efforts. But now, someone is about to destroy this achievement. Are you going to just let it happen? Do you really want the people of Turpan to be slaves? To be looked down upon forever? After a series of questions, Shurigan and Daiqin couldn't help but frown. Seeing that his words were effective, Harden Barter suddenly stood up, then bowed to the two of them. Your Highness the First Prince, what do you mean by this? The two generals who couldn't accept such a grand gesture hurriedly stood up. No matter how much they had contributed to Turpan, Harden Barter was still the first prince. The relationship between master and servant couldn't be messed up. I don't mean anything. This prince is just begging the two of you on behalf of the people of Turpan. In this moment of life and death, please help us. The people here will remember your heroic deeds for generations to come. Thank you. While speaking, Harden Barter once again lowered his head. At this moment, the two generals were clearly moved. Their faces became very hesitant. Sensing the change in the two, Harden Barter opened his mouth again and said, Generals, we just don't want to see the people of Turpan being humiliated. Besides, we don't want to do anything to father. We can't endanger his life. We just want him to retire in advance. The political power of Turpan is still in the hands of our royal family. What you are doing is not a rebellion but a meritorious deed. Harden Barter knew that the other party was hesitating. Perhaps they were just a step away. At this moment, Harden Barter forcefully pushed them again. The two still didn't move. Harden Barter was a bit anxious. After thinking about it, he had to make up his mind and say, Generals, I don't know if you have thought about it. If you surrender the 5-star army, what will happen to you? As for your family and children, I'm afraid that their lives might be threatened at any time. As men, can you bear to see such a thing happen? When that time comes, regret will be useless. You won't be qualified husbands, qualified fathers. The humiliation will accompany you for the rest of your lives. How will you have the face to see them? Chapter 1202. Harden Bartle decided to be ruthless and started to attack his family. It had to be said that this move was very effective, especially since the two generals were loyal people. They were naturally very good to their families. If they really surrendered to the 5-star army, then anything could happen. As men, they couldn't even guarantee the safety of their family. This was something they couldn't accept. If such a thing really happened, it would be a fate worse than death for them. No. Don't say any more. Shurigan couldn't take it anymore and shouted. I'll follow the first prince, but no matter what, please remember that you can't hurt the old king. Definitely not. Yes, we can't hurt the old king. We are where we are today because of the old king. We can't let him down anymore. General Daiqin also couldn't help but say. Seeing that the two generals finally agreed, Harden Barter breathed a sigh of relief. A smile appeared on his face as he said, All right, the two generals can rest assured. I assure you that I won't let anyone threaten my father's safety. Next, can you send troops into the palace? You know that the commander's seal is in my father's hands. I can't move a single soldier. That's not a problem. I can move 200 soldiers. Since they were going to submit to the first prince, they naturally had to show their strength. Shurigan expressed his attitude. I can also move 200 soldiers. Also, I can move more than half of the palace's guards in the name of patrolling. This way our next move will be much smoother. Daiqin said in the same tone. Okay. With the two of you we can succeed. However, there is one more thing. Imperial Father promised the envoy from the 5-star army that he would open the city gates to welcome them in 5 days. If that's the case, once they are allowed to enter, I'm afraid that it would be impossible for us to stop them. Tomorrow is the date of the 5-day agreement. Can the two generals see if anyone can go there in advance? This was what Harden Barter was truly concerned about. Once the main gate was occupied, the Turpan kingdom would enter a passive state in the following battles. Knowing that this was a serious matter, the two generals looked at each other. In the end, Shurigan stepped forward and said, If that's the case, I'll bring some men over. The general guarding the city is my subordinate. You should listen to me. Seeing that the rising Sun God had taken the initiative to take on this important mission, Harden Barter was naturally overjoyed. All right, then I'll leave everything to you, General. Your 200 soldiers can also go with you. After all, it's most important to not lose control of the situation. No need. 8 Mile City has 20,000 soldiers. I won't be able to take it down even if I don't bring 200 soldiers with me. This time I'm convincing you with reason. I know what I'm doing. Shirigan shook his head. He knew that forcing King Shiza to step down was the most important thing. Otherwise, even if he took control of 8 Mile City, he would be labeled as a traitor. Then he would have no way out. The matter was decided just like that. After Shirigan left the first prince's residence, he quickly rode his horse and only brought 2 soldiers to 8 Mile City. His time was limited. After all, he had to get there before dawn. Otherwise, some things would be unstoppable. The first prince and General Daichin stayed behind. After some discussion, they decided to take down the palace at 3 in the morning. That was when people entered a deep sleep. It was also when people's guard was at its lowest. Whether it was King Shiza of Turpan or the spies that Yang Xie arranged in Turpan, none of them knew about this. No one believed that a rebellion was about to happen. No one doubted that someone actually dared to do this. To outsiders, both Shirigan and Daichin were personally promoted by King Shiza. How could a dog bite its master? At night, the weather at the end of September was already a bit cold. The palace guards who were in charge of patrolling the palace had already entered a half-asleep state. After Daichin used the reason of patrolling to take away half of the palace guards, the entire palace's defense level dropped to the lowest. There were less than 500 people and most of them were in a muddle-headed state. Especially when it was about to be daybreak, a person's guard was really low. It was also at this moment that black figures flipped over the walls and entered. Like venomous snakes, they moved towards the inner courtyard of the palace without any signs of life. They made their way in layer by layer, getting closer and closer to King Shiza's chambers. Who is it? As the large group of black-clothed soldiers entered, their movements finally attracted the attention of the palace guards. Following this shout, an arrow pierced through the air and hit the chest of the person who shouted. The arrow pierced through the heart and died. This arrow was like the order to attack. Countless black shadows shouted and charged forward. They charged towards the palace guards who were completely unprepared and didn't expect this at all. The chaos started. Due to the lack of preparation and the fact that their forces were evenly matched, they quickly broke through one line of defense after another and got closer and closer to the king's palace. Such a large commotion had already woken up King Shiza, who was sleeping. When he heard from the guards that a group of people had surrounded the palace and were getting closer and closer to him, Shiza was so scared that he hid under a dragon table. His whole body trembled as he kept repeating the same sentence, "Don't kill me, don't kill me." When the sky was bright, 300 of the palace guards were killed, 100 injured and close to 100 captured. King Shiza, who had fainted from fear, was carried away and placed in a secret place. Under the accompaniment of General Daichin, Prince Harden Barter sat on the throne as he wished. He also received the tiger token and country seal to command the army, confirming the fact that he was the new king of Turpan. Don't lose 8 Mile City. When the sky brightened, the East City Gate near the 5-star Army's camp was all opened, showing that they were determined to surrender according to the agreement. Advance. Yang Qindong stood in front of the main camp and waved his arm with a smile. Immediately, the 5,000 Mongol cavalry of the Wufeng army raised the 5-star flag and charged towards Don't Lose 8 Mile City. Each and every one of the cavalry was filled with vigor. On the city wall, Shirigan, who had already put on a set of general armor, squinted his eyes as he looked at the scene in front of him. He had arrived before dawn, and after some persuasion, the general of the city guard had returned to his side. Of course, part of the reason was because of Shirigan's persuasion. Of course, it was also because the defending soldiers didn't want to surrender before even shooting an arrow. As a soldier, as long as one had courage, unless it was necessary, no one would be willing to surrender. Get ready. Seeing that the vanguard of the 5-star army had arrived at the city gate and were about to enter, Shirigan shouted, "Fire!" So. The Turpan soldiers who were hiding under the battlements jumped out like fishes. They were like heavenly soldiers descending from the heavens. All of them took out their bows and shot at the defenseless 5-star army cavalry. Since they were defenseless and didn't expect something like this to happen, hundreds of them were hit by arrows. Some of them were killed on the spot while others were injured. They cried out in pain on their horses. Close the city gate. After succeeding in his attack, Shirigan immediately gave the order to close the city gate. He noticed that the 5-star army had more than 100,000 soldiers. Even if he had the upper hand, if he wasn't careful, he wouldn't be able to defend the city. The sudden change at the city gate caught the 5-star army off guard. The Mongol cavalry general, Narasong, who was following the troops to enter the city, ordered the cavalry to retreat. His eyes were red as he rushed back to the tent and knelt in front of Yang Qindong. "My king," the Turfan army went back on their words. "Please allow me to lead the troops to siege the city to collect the blood debt." At that moment, not only Narasong but all the other generals had bloodshot eyes. They were furious. Yang Qindong, who was wearing a golden cape, didn't look any better. He didn't expect the Turpan army to do such a thing and lie to him. Although the Mongol cavalry wasn't his own, since they were able to join him, he was confident that he could turn them into his own. After all, they were his soldiers. Of course, he was furious that such a thing happened. Report. Just as all the generals were furious and were waiting for the order to attack the city, Wang Shan suddenly appeared. He held a telegram from the Turpan Security Bureau and handed it to Yang Qindong. After taking it and glancing through it, Yang Qindong sucked in a cold breath. At the same time, the anger in his heart subsided. He looked at the generals and said, "Let's retreat. Let's go back to the tent for a discussion." Yang Qindong turned around and walked into the tent. At that moment, Badao Jiang, who was wearing the black cavalry uniform, was kneeling on the ground. Kneeling with him were Qiu Vi, Dao Shao, Peng Yu and a few other captains. It was obvious that they had seen how the Turpan army went back on their words and even used the chance to injure the Mongol cavalry. Thinking back to how confident he was when he had completed the mission, Badao Jiang was here to ask for forgiveness. The rest of the people were tied up so that the sixth young master could deal with them leniently. "Get up. This isn't your fault. Badao Jiang, you've completed your mission well." Yang Qindong walked in front of the crowd and stopped. After he finished speaking, he walked into the big tent. If it was before he saw the telegram, Yang Qindong might have been furious. However, now that he knew what had happened, he wouldn't make things difficult for Badao Jiang. Speaking of which, he didn't expect such a thing to happen. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.